The story centers around a young man named Takuto who spent most of his time absorbed in a strategy game called Eternal Nations. Confined to a hospital bed, Takuto found solace and meaning only in playing Eternal Nations and eventually died with the game still running. But his death wasn't final. Moments later, he opens his eyes, finding himself sitting on a throne amid ancient ruins in a forest. His first thought is about how incredibly fresh and real the air feels. Suddenly, a woman approaches him, gently asking if he's finally awake. When she reveals her face, Takuto instantly recognizes her as Atu, an elven character from Eternal Nations. Atu respectfully calls him Your Majesty, leaving Takuto utterly confused, wondering what on earth is happening. As an experienced anime fan, he quickly figures out he must have somehow been transported into the world of Eternal Nations, the very game world he spent countless hours in. But this realization brings more questions. Typically, Atu would only address her king this way if he were the Lord of Manara, the nation Takuto previously led in the game. Atu speaks again, this time calling him Takuto-sama, and explains further. She mentions Takuto is the first ever player to conquer nightmare difficulty using Manara, widely known as the toughest civilization in the game. She proudly reveals that Takuto is listed on the game's global leaderboards, giving him legendary status. Takuto's confusion deepens even further. How can a mere game character know about things beyond her own game world reality? And Atu gently explains that she remembers everything, every victory, every defeat, each word Takuto ever spoke to her through his screen, and the entire journey they shared together until now. Hearing this, Takuto is overcome with emotion, tears forming in his eyes. He tells Atu how happy he is to finally speak to her directly, confessing she was always his favorite character in Eternal Nations. Atu warmly replies that she feels precisely the same way. Still, none of this clarifies how he ended up here, so Takuto looks at Atu directly and asks if it was she who brought him into this world. Atu honestly admits she has no clue how they got here, as she herself only arrived a few minutes ago. Still, she's certain of one thing: the place they're in feels exactly like the world of Eternal Nations. Regardless of their location, Atu is deeply grateful she's finally met her true king in person. Holding Takuto's hands gently, she urges him to begin their journey anew together. Atu shares her dream of rebuilding an empire with just the two of them, and since Takuto has nothing else left, he gladly agrees to join her quest. When Takuto extends his hand to formally shake on their partnership, Atu suddenly switches to her NPC persona, introducing herself dramatically as Sludge Atu, an illegitimate child born of a fallen world. She solemnly pledges her entire being, mind, soul, and body entirely to Takuto. Though Atu's character is technically evil, the theatrics feel painfully cliché, leaving both her and Takuto momentarily embarrassed. Still, Takuto decides to lean into it, dramatically declaring that alongside Atu, his trusted right hand, he'll establish Manara, the most sinister empire of them all. Takuto then turns to Atu, asking if she remembers what Manara must always do first. Proudly, Atu states they should hide themselves away completely, staying unseen like true recluses to avoid discovery. Taking action immediately, Takuto summons an emergency production scout, a strange insect-like creature with extremely long legs. Given Manara's alignment with evil and destruction, all their units naturally look horrifying, including the scout. Regardless, Takuto issues commands instructing it to thoroughly investigate their surroundings, and Atu sternly reminds it that disappointing their king isn't an option. And obediently, the scout departs on its assigned task. Takuto then reveals to Atu that he can actually see through the scout's eyes, confirming to both of them that the world indeed works just like the game. He briefly explains to Atu how summoning works here. His current total magic power is at 200 MP, and creating the scout consumed 100 MP. Takuto carefully considers his options for spending his remaining magic points. Building a base would cost only 20 MP, but he also wonders if he should prioritize defense by summoning a warrior. Unfortunately, doing so would consume more power than he currently possesses. In Eternal Nations, Atu is classified as a hero character, making her particularly powerful in combat. But since their new journey has barely begun, Atu's current strength level remains only at level 3, which is quite low. Anyway, thanks to the scout's reconnaissance, Takuto gains a clear picture of their surroundings, which primarily consists of endless forests. So this setting proves an ideal location for establishing Manara's base, though Atu finds it unsettling that there's absolutely no wildlife or available food nearby. Realizing it would be too dangerous to relocate, Takuto instructs the scout to extend its search and explore an even wider perimeter. Atu then begins feeling downhearted, believing she's not contributing enough to assist her king. Seeing her discouraged expression, Takuto gently reassures her, saying that simply having her by his side is more than enough. Deeply touched by his sincere words, Atu instantly becomes even more devoted to him. Meanwhile, their scout soon discovers a campsite inhabited by a group of dark elves. Takuto hesitates, unsure what their next move should be because accidentally encroaching on another group's territory could cause serious problems, so he figures it's best for them to lay low for now. Atu suggests optimistically that if things do take a turn for the worse, they can simply escape together. Her encouragement boosts Takuto's confidence, so they decide to quietly observe the dark elves from a safe distance and find out what they're doing here. But suddenly, 3 dark elves stumble directly into them, catching both Takuto and Atu off guard. Takuto freezes in surprise, realizing the dark elves he planned to carefully avoid, those same elves he was prepared to flee from if they ever crossed paths, are now standing right in front of them. Both he and Atu remain unsure about how the encounter will turn out, but recognizing the importance of staying calm in situations like this, they manage to maintain their composure. At the same time, the Dark Elves have no intention of harming anyone. They explain that they've recently been driven from the city they once called home and have desperately led their people into the forest to seek safety. And after a difficult journey, they've managed to set up a temporary shelter in this cursed land. However, with no food available, they're in a desperate situation, knowing their children will starve without supplies. Captain Nagi, leader of the Dark Elves, is currently exploring this bleak forest alongside his soldiers, increasingly worried their journey might have been completely futile since the area seems utterly lifeless. Several of Nagi's men start complaining bitterly, arguing it might have been better if they just stayed and died back in the city, rather than starving out here. They recall grim stories about the forest being cursed by a mysterious man, a place where neither life nor love can ever flourish. Nagi quickly warns them against losing hope, reminding his people that if they falter now, their children waiting anxiously back at camp won't have any chance at all. He firmly reminds them their kids still have faith in them, and that turning back empty-handed simply isn't an option. Still, as Nagi continues forward, he can't help but reflect on his soldiers' grim words. Deep down, he knows they're not wrong. The chances of survival here seem impossibly slim. But as their leader, he can't afford to show fear or give up because his people depend on him to guide them safely through this crisis. Walking deeper into the woods, Nagi suddenly senses the presence of Takuto and Atu. A wave of dread rushes through him, afraid that these unknown entities might attack without mercy and wipe out his entire team. Whatever choice he makes next could determine the fate of his people, so Nagi steels himself, deciding to approach diplomatically. When Nagi finally reaches them, he's taken aback by Takuto's shadowy, spirit-like appearance, though Atu seems relatively normal. Without hesitation, Nagi immediately drops to his knees, prompting his followers to do the same. Then, with a voice full of humility, he apologizes for entering their territory uninvited. Atu, glaring coldly at Nagi, sharply questions him, demanding to know why he would trespass despite knowing it was forbidden. Nagi nervously explains their desperate circumstances, how their people were banished without warning, forced to flee their city without supplies, the exhausting journey, and the starving children still waiting anxiously in the forest. Feeling increasingly anxious under Atu's harsh gaze, Nagi braces himself, convinced they're about to execute him. However, Takuto surprises him by calmly asking if he's hungry. Nagi hesitates nervously, uncertain how to respond until Atu firmly instructs him to answer her master's question. Quietly, Nagi admits he is hungry, and immediately Takuto conjures several apples out of thin air. Nagi stares in bewilderment, never having seen an apple before, unsure if they're even edible. Takuto kindly assures him that the fruit is juicy and delicious, encouraging him to try it. Still hesitant, Nagi looks behind him, shocked to see his men already devouring the apples eagerly. Atu then firmly urges him to eat as well, yet Nagi still feels uneasy. Noticing his hesitation, Takuto promptly conjures pears as well. Now Nagi is openly suspicious, deeply confused by Takuto's generosity. The Dark Elves had always been viewed with hostility, constantly rejected by others. To suddenly encounter someone willing to help without any hidden motive felt disturbingly unnatural. Nagi finally states he'd rather bring the food back to feed the starving children in their camp. But before he can even finish his sentence, Takuto conjures even more fruit for him. Overwhelmed, Nagi can only feel gratitude and disbelief. Meanwhile, back at the camp, the Dark Elf children lie weak and exhausted, silently praying for rescue. Suddenly, they catch a familiar scent in the air. Their prayers are answered because Nagi and his soldiers have returned, bringing with them more food than they've ever seen. Nagi joyfully tells everyone to prepare for a feast, and soon they're all eagerly eating, and the starving children quickly regain their strength. One of the elves then curiously asks Nagi where he got all the food, but Nagi avoids giving details. Instead, he simply tells them fate finally smiled upon them. Yet deep in his heart, he remains haunted by the memory of the mysterious, intimidating figure he encountered in the forest. After the meal, everyone falls into a peaceful sleep, except for Nagi, who remains awake, staring thoughtfully into the fire. As he stands watch, Elder Molter approaches quietly, gently pulling Nagi out of his deep contemplation. Molter expresses gratitude for Nagi's efforts but mentions that the fruit tasted unlike anything he's ever known even after living 200 years. Nagi nods, agreeing that the fruit definitely tasted strange. Molter presses him about where the food came from, prompting Nagi to confess they encountered a legendary figure after wandering deep into the cursed forest. Hearing this, Molter wonders aloud if it was perhaps the King of Ruin, recalling ancient stories about a mythical being said to appear when the world becomes too crowded, destroying everything and returning civilization to darkness. But no one knows if those legends hold any truth, since nobody's ever witnessed it personally. Molter asks Nagi directly if the mysterious figure introduced himself as the King of Ruin. Nagi admits Takuto never actually introduced himself at all. He only spoke through his servant. Molter insists there's no way a dark entity like that would offer assistance for free, demanding to know what Nagi promised in exchange. Nagi, however, insists it was purely an act of generosity from Takuto, nothing else. Molter remains skeptical, arguing no evil being ever offers help without hidden motives. Nagi firmly calls Takuto the Great One, determined to defend him and emphasizing that he simply chose to help. Molter counters that such a noble title doesn't suit the rumored King of Ruin, but Nagi refuses to budge. He argues passionately that Takuto deserves the respect because he helped them in their time of need, and frustratingly wonders if it might have been better if they all died rather than receive such aid. Hearing this, Molter reluctantly concedes Nagi's point, agreeing to handle negotiations personally when the time comes to repay their mysterious benefactor. Nagi gazes over at his sleeping people, silently questioning when they might finally rest without fear. At the same time, Atu is thoroughly upset with Takuto for wasting valuable mana by feeding total strangers. She sternly forces him onto his knees as he tries to explain he simply felt sorry for them. Hedru can't believe his recklessness, reminding him sharply, they don't yet know whether Minavra will be peaceful or brutal, or how many battles might lie ahead. So wasting mana like that could be dangerous. Realizing she might have gone too far scolding her own king, Atu quickly apologizes. But Takuto gently reassures her, reminding her they're partners and that he couldn't survive in this place without her by his side. He also admits feeling awkward around the Dark Elves, suggesting perhaps he's shy. Atu is surprised. She assumed Takuto was deliberately playing the role of a dignified king, communicating solely through her as his servant. The two laugh and tease each other playfully for a moment, until Takuto's summoned scout finally returns. The following morning, Nagi prepares himself for another visit to Takuto, and Elder Molter asks if he's really prepared to meet the Dark King. Molter strongly believes that since they've already accepted aid from the Dark King, they must also be prepared to pay whatever price he demands in return. Nagi objects, reminding him that Takuto never once suggested anything like that, but Molter insists it's simply in the nature of evil beings to ask something in exchange for any act of kindness. Yet he agrees they need to rely on Takuto for now since nowhere else is safe. So they decide to visit Takuto together, completely unaware that his insect scout had been observing their entire conversation. Takuto quickly calls back the scout to report to him, and upon hearing that the elves are on their way, he quietly hopes they'll just pick up the remaining food he had prepared yesterday and leave without causing a fuss. Anxiety quickly starts to grip Takuto as he explains to Atu that he's terrible with conversations and doesn't know if he'll be able to negotiate properly with the Dark Elves. Atu reassures him she'll handle it herself, adding that this will also show the Dark Elves that her king would stoop low enough to speak with them personally. Shortly after, Molter and Nagi arrive, and the elder Molter greets Takuto with an overly formal and eloquent salutation, almost like something straight out of cover letter, thanking him for the generous provision he offered his folk. Molter then respectfully asks permission to know the identity of their Dark King. After receiving permission from Takuto, Atu reveals his name proudly, declaring him to be the feared Dark King of Ruin himself. Both of the Dark Elves become visibly shaken upon having their worst fears confirmed. Atu then coldly instructs them to simply take the food and leave because it's not going to last much longer anyway. Yet Molter politely insists on repaying Takuto for his generosity and asks what they can possibly give him in return. Atu coldly informs him that there's nothing in their possession capable of pleasing her king, so attempting repayment would be pointless. She then questions if the elves even have anything left that they consider valuable at all, causing Molter to hesitate as he realizes they genuinely have nothing worthwhile to give. Noticing his hesitation, Atu immediately gives him a cold, intimidating stare and suspiciously asks him if he's secretly planning something. Molter becomes visibly flustered, and Takuto quickly realizes their conversation is going downhill fast, so he immediately signals Atu over to quietly discuss how they should proceed. But Atu becomes frustrated because she thinks Takuto is being way too soft on these two hopeless elves. And she insists these guys have zero clue how to handle negotiations, and if this continues, they'll just turn into an annoying headache later on. So she dramatically suggests killing them both and displaying their heads around the base as a clear warning, but Takuto quickly tells her to stop acting like a secco. He calmly explains that the elves genuinely seem to want peaceful coexistence and sincerely wish to repay their kindness. Instead of just handing out freebies, he suggests they ask for something small in return, keeping their relations with the elves positive. Atu reluctantly agrees and then tells the elves that her king has generously decided to accept their offer of repayment. Seeing Molter suddenly relax makes Takuto and Atu both realize he was freaking out earlier because he had totally assumed Takuto would act like a typical villain. Atu scolds Molter for misjudging her king so harshly, but then she pauses, realizing she doesn't actually know what to ask them for. Thankfully, Takuto quickly comes up with a great idea and suggests that they ask the elves to provide them with information about the world outside this forest. Molter immediately lights up with relief, promising eagerly that he'll share every bit of knowledge he's gained about the outside world. Atu nods but adds sternly that once Molter has provided the information, he and his tribe must leave the forest immediately. This shocks Nagi and Molter deeply, and they quickly plead to be allowed to continue living there under Takuto's protection, but Atu snaps at them to quit pushing their luck if they value their lives. Nagi tries to argue further, but Molter quickly silences him, admitting they must respect the king's wishes. They begin turning to leave, but watching them, Takuto suddenly feels a pang of guilt for kicking them out like this. He abruptly changes his mind, telling Molter and Nagi that instead of leaving, they can become citizens of his kingdom. Both elves freeze up completely, stunned by this unexpected kindness, though no one is more shocked than Atu, who can't believe what she's hearing. She immediately questions Takuto's logic, asking what the hell he's thinking. He calmly reminds her about the refugee system from the game, allowing different races to peacefully join their nation. And since dark elves are neutral aligned, he points out they'll easily blend in with their kingdom's evil attribute, making coexistence entirely possible. Atu still isn't totally convinced because evil-aligned species usually end up causing drama among themselves. But Takuto gently refreshes her memory that their main citizens, named homunculi, literally look like humans who got shredded and put back together by a 5-year-old, and there's no way they're going to be hanging out with those creepy things all day. The horrifying image of the homunculi immediately pops into Atu's mind, instantly changing her mind. She quickly agrees and turns to Moltar and Nagi, declaring that Takuto plans to build a full-fledged kingdom soon and is generously offering them citizenship if they're willing to swear loyalty. Moltar hesitates, asking what exactly it means to become their citizens, and Atu bluntly answers that they'd basically become evil-aligned beings. Still, she assures them with a sly smile that being evil isn't nearly as bad as it sounds. It's actually a lot more fun. Not long after, Takuto and Atu visit the Dark Elves' settlement, where everyone anxiously awaits their arrival. They're so terrified that some of the weaker elves pass out at just the sight of Takuto. Calmly, Takuto takes his place on the throne with Atu at his side, who announces clearly to everyone gathered that from now on, they officially belong to their new kingdom, Managra. She then asks Takuto if he's certain, and with a confident he says yeah, and then confirms that on his screen. And just like that, the Dark Elves are officially citizens of Managra. Atu congratulates them, emphasizing that from now onward, their safety and survival are personally guaranteed by their new king. Nagi wonders out loud if that's really it, because he doesn't actually feel any different, despite supposedly becoming an evil being. Almost immediately, he regrets speaking too soon when a wave of overwhelming hatred suddenly floods through him and the rest of the elves. Painful memories of being persecuted and attacked surge in their minds, filling them with an intense desire for revenge. Seeing everyone suddenly suffering, Takuto softly asks if they're alright, and hearing his genuine concern, Nagi becomes emotional and deeply moved by the realization that someone finally cares about them. With tears streaming down their faces, the Dark Elves start passionately cheering for Takuto, leaving him a little overwhelmed but deeply touched by their enthusiasm. After a few days, Moltar presents a map of the continent to Takuto, who immediately collapses in disbelief. Atu asks what's troubling him, and he simply gestures towards the map, saying their starting location couldn't be any freaking worse. They're stuck on a continent shared by two damn gigantic, powerful civilizations. On one side is the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, a massive human nation worshipping Arlos, a creator and known for being annoyingly righteous and strictly good-aligned. On the opposite side lies Elna, the Elemental Alliance, a nation of elves devoted to nature. They're equally on the side of good, making Atu realize they're literally sandwiched between two huge civilizations that would wipe them out in an instant if discovered. Panicking, Atu falls beside Takuto in despair. But Takuto quickly regains composure, reminding her that as long as they keep a low profile, they can quietly grow stronger. He recalls that their main race, the homunculi, were dumb as rocks in the game and terrible at research. Luckily, now that they've got Dark Elves on their side, things should go much smoother. Soon after, the Dark Elves arrive for a meeting, this time bringing along Emil, Nagi's assistant. Nagi introduces her as a nerdy genius who knows way more than him about foreign kingdoms, and insists she'll definitely prove useful. Atu conveys to the elves that their dedication has pleased the king, and she announces they're all about to receive major responsibilities directly ordered by Takuto himself. First up, Moltar is tasked with managing internal affairs. Atu says she expects big things from him, especially since she learned he knows magic too. Next, she appoints Nagi as the head of Minara's warriors, charging him with building a powerful military for defense. When she leaves recruitment up to him, Nagi is way too excited, shouting dramatically that he'll destroy all their enemies and proudly mount their heads as trophies. But Takuto's already feeling queasy at the gruesome imagery. He quietly remarks that war is barbaric, and Atu clarifies for the confused Nagi that their king actually prefers peace, so he needs to chill out with the killing talk. This just confuses Nagi even more, who wonders what kind of dark king of ruin is into peace. Moltar, seeing Nagi's confusion, sarcastically teases him and confidently states that unlike Nagi, who clearly has more muscles than brains, he himself will prove far more useful to Takuto. Nagi immediately takes it as a challenge, boasting loudly to Takuto that he's young and full of energy, ready to tirelessly serve the king without rest. Atu completely misunderstands their little competition as genuine dedication, staking them for workaholics instead of two idiots desperate for Big Evil Daddy's approval. She turns to Takuto, asking if they should send them on a resource-collecting mission, but Takuto suggests a better idea, beautifying the land and building proper homes. Atu immediately relays this to Moltar, instructing him to gather timber for building, but to make sure he doesn't ruin the beauty of the forest. Moltar eagerly agrees, boasting that Dark Elves were originally forest dwellers anyway, so he'll handle it perfectly. Takuto then adds that they should reforest the areas they clear, causing confusion among the elves who've never even heard the term before. Realizing this world might be more primitive than expected, Takuto cautiously asks if they're familiar with military magic or the 6 major elements. Molter replies that he's only heard of 4 major elements, while Emil admits she's never even seen military magic being used by any kingdom. Takuto and A2 exchange looks, realizing they've hit a jackpot. This world is even less advanced than they'd thought, giving them a huge advantage to leap ahead quickly once they implement advanced magical technology. A2 patiently explains that reforesting means rapidly regrowing new trees to replace ones they've cut down using magic. The elves mention they do regrow trees naturally, but admit they never considered using magic to speed things up. A2 describes how reforesting employs the 6 major elements to rapidly grow new trees, then promptly credits this discovery to Takuto, even though it's a total lie. She starts glazing Takuto shamelessly, bragging about how he even created those special fruits the elves ate earlier, especially mentioning that grapes are her personal favorite. Emil excitedly confirms A2's words, then says that she also planted some grape seeds and they've actually started sprouting. Takuto himself is stunned by this revelation, not expecting earth-based fruits to grow so easily here. Suddenly inspired, he quickly tests his theory by magically creating a coin from earth. When it works, he's thrilled to realize he could potentially introduce advanced technologies like gunpowder, drastically accelerating the growth and superiority of his civilization compared to others. At the same time, over in the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, things were also beginning to heat up. St. Solina marched ahead of a squad of knights through snow-blanketed foothills, determined to wipe out some vicious creatures menacing the surrounding villages. The moment a pack of goblins rushed into view, Solina calmly raised her staff, incinerating them instantly with her sacred fire. The holy blaze dissipated into the sky after obliterating the monsters, and gentle sunlight poured down onto the charred earth, prompting flowers to bloom in their place. Turning to its astonished knights, their captain proudly announced that Solina's divine power purged monsters of evil alignment, leaving behind blossoming flower fields, and it was her ability alone that had allowed them to maintain such strong diplomatic ties with the elves. Following the brief skirmish, Solina confronted the cardinal, urging him to send paladins southward, warning that she'd recently sensed an ominous disturbance within the cursed forest. But the cardinal flatly refused, claiming the cursed forest sat at the far edge of the continent and deploying paladins that would require special authorization from those above him. Unfazed, Solina firmly warned him that she would personally handle the matter if no troops were sent. Initially, the cardinal tried pushing back but quickly caved under her icy glare, promising instead to send whatever limited forces he could personally command. Meanwhile, back in their own domain, Takuto and A2 were focused on developing their newfound territory, beginning by constructing decent homes for the Dark Elves. They'd already thrown together a makeshift throne room around Takuto's throne, and he was thrilled by the idea of finally hosting important meetings with the prominent members of his kingdom. Right then, Molter, Nagi, and Emil entered ready for action. A2 informed them that it was about damn time to kick off their first official council meeting. But before the meeting could start, Emil eagerly approached Takuto, revealing a gift, an elegant new outfit that, to his mild embarrassment, was dangerously close to femboy territory. Still, Takuto gratefully accepted the new clothes, admitting his old garments were getting embarrassingly filthy, and thanked the elves sincerely. Oddly enough, the elves couldn't see any visible change in his appearance, but they decided to trust A2's enthusiastic praise about how perfectly the outfit suited their beloved leader. With the clothing crisis resolved, A2 briskly began the council meeting, only to realize Takuto was still hopelessly lost and admiring himself. Slightly annoyed but unsurprised, she chose to carry on the meeting herself, casually suggesting she consult Takuto whenever his actual input was needed, and Takuto happily agreed to her suggestion, fully content to keep silently fawning over his own fabulousness. As the meeting begins, Molter immediately asks A2 about the type of buildings they ought to prioritize. So A2 confidently suggests they start with food production facilities and promptly reveals a disturbingly grotesque plant, announcing that it will serve as their primary food source for now. The elves visibly cringed, barely able to hide their disgust, before hesitantly asking A2 what the hell that horrific thing was supposed to be. With unsettling enthusiasm, she informed them it was called the flesh plant, a unique delicacy of their civilization. According to A2, it produced meat that tasted disturbingly similar to human flesh, but was incredibly nutritious. Horrified by this revelation, the elves quickly clarified they weren't exactly into eating people. A2 assured them the flesh plant was just a temporary solution for their food shortage, and soon enough they'd have far less disturbing options available. After that unsettling announcement, she explained they'd also need storage units and administrative buildings near the farms, till Emil promptly volunteered to oversee those structures. Next, A2 shifted gears to the next crucial topic on the agenda: research. She emphasized that obtaining cutting-edge tech was absolutely critical for a fledgling nation like theirs. Molter, intrigued, asked her specifically what sort of technology they should focus on, and A2 excitedly revealed their target would be magical tech. Takuto practically lit up with excitement upon hearing that, and Molter eagerly declared that as a skilled mage, he'd put in his best effort to impress their king. He followed up, asking precisely what kind of magical tech they should aim for, and A2 enthusiastically revealed they'd dive straight into military magic research. She explained that standard attack spells were pitifully limited, barely managing to handle a handful of enemies, while advanced military-grade magic could annihilate entire cities or even reshape terrain to their advantage. Molter, now fired up, immediately agreed to round up all magically gifted elves and begin working on groundbreaking magical spells that hadn't even appeared yet in their world. Then Atu moved on to the final topic of the meeting, their military strategy. Nagi perked up instantly, excited that it was finally his turn to shine. But Takuto quickly burst his bubble by bluntly stating they wouldn't heavily invest in their military right now. Atu backed him up, pointing out armies cost a shitload to maintain but produce nothing useful during peaceful periods. Nagi protested strongly, arguing they lacked sufficient power to properly defend their king, and thus should definitely prioritize their military. Molter also joined in, reminding them that both he and Nagi had massive bounties placed on their heads as Dark Elf leaders, meaning their kingdom might soon become a juicy target for enemies. Understanding their concerns, Takuto quickly came up with a smarter alternative, creating a hero to defend the kingdom. Atu immediately agreed, admitting heroes were expensive upfront but required zero upkeep, making them the perfect choice given their current situation. The elves stared blankly, clearly having zero clue what the hell a hero was even supposed to be. Atu quickly clarified that heroes were ridiculously powerful beings who served directly under the king. She explained that each hero had certain conditions that needed to be met before summoning them, but she confidently reassured them they'd be able to summon their first hero fairly soon. Takuto, pumped as ever, was already hyped up at the idea. He remembered that nearly everything in this world required mana, and a kingdom could only gather that mana directly from its own people. The happier the citizens were, the more mana they produce, and Takuto made a silent vow right there. He'd turn this kingdom into the happiest damn place on the entire planet. At the same time, far away in the holy kingdom of Qualia, a junior paladin named Lornias had just gotten the dubious honor of being selected for an investigation team heading straight into the notorious Cursed Forest. Accompanying him was a veteran paladin named Wordle, whose favorite pastime was clearly making Lornias' life a living hell with his constant teasing. Wordle immediately started bitching about the tiny size of their investigation unit, consisting of only 2 paladins and a handful of mercenaries. He grumbled loudly about how the church should seriously start taking St. Solina's prophecies more seriously. Lornias cautiously agreed, though he was painfully aware nobody could predict what the higher-ups had planned. One thing he did know, though, was that if they managed to pull off this investigation, it'd receive huge rewards, but if things went south, his head would definitely be the first on the chopping block. Back in Minoura, Takuto strolled through the developing kingdom, inspecting the early stages of his civilization with a deep sense of nostalgia. It was a scene he witnessed thousands of times before, but always through a screen, never in person. This time, he was right in the thick of things. Enmol eagerly gave him a detailed tour, proudly explaining that dark elves excelled at constructing treehouses, although right now the housing project was crawling along since the elves had prioritized cultivating the flesh trees. Fortunately, the grotesque flesh trees seemed to be thriving nicely, and they'd already managed to build storage and administrative facilities. Enmol also mentioned that they discovered a freshwater spring close by and were now trying to find ways to draw water from it. Meanwhile, Molter and a bunch of other mages had been grinding hard on their magic research in a recently completed lab. Hearing all this progress made Takuto feel genuinely relieved, but he was particularly delighted to hear that the elves were proactively handling things like seeking out water sources on their own. Seeing the elves, who had looked utterly drained when they first arrived, now smiling happily was a huge relief. When Takuto shared his joy with Enmol, she suddenly burst into tears of happiness, completely startling him. Takuto panicked momentarily at the unexpected meltdown, but thankfully Enmol quickly regained her composure and continued the tour as if nothing had happened. Next, Enmol guided Takuto and Atu toward the flesh tree farm. With noticeable excitement, she explained that thanks to the tools Takuto had generously provided, they'd soon be able to enjoy their very first harvest. After that, Enmol guided them toward the freshwater spring the elves had discovered earlier, but immediately noticed the vibe was totally different this time around. Instead of clear, sparkling water, it had turned murky and dark, leaving Enmol visibly crushed, assuming it had become unusable. Before Atu could even explain why that wasn't the case, Molter and Nagi also arrived to check out the water. Both of them quickly agreed with Enmol, believing the spring had been ruined, but Atu just casually scooped up some of the gloomy-looking liquid and took a long sip, assuring everyone that it was perfectly safe. Atu then clarified that the spring only looked creepy and unsettling because it had officially become part of Minoura, all thanks to a neat little feature known as cursed terrain. Takuto chimed in, gently telling the elves to take a deep breath. As soon as they inhaled the gloomy air, they were instantly energized, their minds clearer, and their bodies revitalized. Atu happily explained that cursed terrain grants bonuses to any creatures aligned with evil, while severely messing up anyone with neutral or good alignment. Since the Dark Elves were now officially part of Minoura and therefore had evil alignment, the water posed no threat whatsoever. Nagi cautiously took a sip himself, confirming her words. Atu added that soon enough the entire forest would transform into this sinister-looking cursed terrain. Regardless, Takuto immediately started worrying aloud, pointing out that cursed terrain stuck out like a sore thumb. Molter nodded gravely, agreeing that once the entire forest turned this ominous shade of creepy, they'd become easy targets for their enemies. Naturally, Nagi jumped at the chance to once again insist they desperately needed an army, but both Takuto and Atu reassured him again that their solution was to summon a hero. Molter, still clueless about what exactly a hero was, pressed for more explanation. Atu decided that a hands-on demonstration would be far more effective than another lecture. Without warning, Atu released a bunch of pitch-black tentacles from her back, effortlessly slicing through the nearby trees like they were toothpicks, before revealing smugly that she herself was a hero. She casually mentioned that she only had about 1% of her full power available, yet she could still obliterate entire armies on her own. Takuto eagerly hyped heroes up even more to the stunned elves, bragging that heroes were truly badass, continuously growing stronger with no effort at all. Realizing he'd gotten a bit carried away, he quickly shifted the conversation and scolded Atu lightly, telling her that showing off didn't require chopping down innocent trees and insisting she clean up the mess afterward. The elves, however, were beyond impressed. They immediately declared Takuto an amazing ruler for having subordinates powerful enough to cause such casual devastation. Fired up, they decided that they absolutely had to construct a magnificent palace worthy of such a king. Takuto awkwardly protested that he didn't really need anything grand right now, but the elves refused to budge, insisting there was no way in hell they'd let their esteemed king live in ordinary homes like theirs. Atu sided with the elves, pointing out that constructing a palace would boost everyone's morale. Unable to argue with that logic, Takuto relented, admitting that while his real dream was a badass flying fortress someday, he'd settle for a regular palace for now. Meanwhile, the investigation squad led by Lornias and Wordle has finally started heading south towards the cursed forests. Wordle still isn't happy about how small their party is, and Lornias reminds him this is literally the best the Empire could do, considering most of their forces are busy dealing with chaos up north. Apparently, a horde of evil-aligned creatures recently popped out of nowhere in the northern territories, raiding and torching entire towns, so naturally all available manpower got shipped off to handle that nightmare. Hearing this, the mercenaries start chatting amongst themselves, muttering how rough it's going to be for the poor bastards sent north. They all feel relieved they dodged that assignment even if the pay was sweet, because word is, there's a terrifying witch mixed up in that mess, and they'd rather steer clear of anything involving a witch. Lornias, curious about this witch rumor, later corners one of the mercenaries, a guy named Bargo, to ask about it. Bargo admits the rumor is that a single witch is behind all the northern chaos, but Lornias dismisses the idea outright, saying no single person could possibly control that many monsters. Bargo quickly agrees, figuring it must actually be some sort of cult activity, but then Wordle chimes in, telling Bargo to shut his mouth before he accidentally curses them all. Lornias then snaps at Wordle, noticing that the guy's been drinking on the job again. He starts lecturing him about how, as paladins serving their god, they're not even allowed to touch alcohol. But Wordle dismisses his scolding casually, even challenging him to a theological debate before abruptly losing interest when a waitress brings him another round of drinks, which prompts him to flirt shamelessly instead. Wargo then turns back to Lornias, seriously asking why the Empire sent 2 paladins this far south. He starts worrying again about the possibility of another witch being involved, openly admitting that if that's the case, he and his men might pack up and bounce before things go south. Lornias honestly replies he doesn't know the details either, but just then Wordle butts back in, casually mentioning he's already gathered some intel from his new waitress friend. Apparently, a bunch of dark elves recently fled into the cursed forests, and the higher-ups likely just want someone to keep an eye on them. Hearing this, Barvo instantly relaxes, saying they'd better deal with the dark elves quickly. After all, those bastards are notorious for their nasty curses and stealthy assassinations. Lornias completely agrees, saying that ignoring the dark elves now will only lead to bigger trouble down the line. But Wordle immediately tells him to calm down and take it easy, reminding him this mission is strictly recon. If things even hint at getting messy, they're packing up and running the hell out. But Lornias is always a stickler about vanquishing evil wherever it shows up, stubbornly insists that as paladins, retreating from danger isn't an option. Wordle scolds Lornias, telling him to stop chasing glory and only fight when it's absolutely necessary instead of jumping into danger every chance he gets. He reminds Lornias that he's got family waiting at home, and so does everyone else on this mission, so they need to think twice before risking their lives. Meanwhile, back in Minara, the first harvest from the flesh trees is finally ready, sitting atop a massive altar at the center of town. Takuto stands in front of the fruit pile as all the dark elves watch him intently, eager to see what's about to go down. Suddenly, Takuto channels his mana directly into the fruits, and right before everyone's eyes, they transform into a giant bug monster. The elves are utterly blown away, amazed that Takuto just created life from a bunch of weird fruits. Atu immediately starts hyping him up, boasting that this miracle isn't even 1% of Takuto's true power. She tells the elves that with their ongoing devotion, Takuto will become even stronger and pull off even crazier feats, and they erupt in cheers for their king. Later on, Takuto returns to his throne, relieved that he successfully managed to produce a bug monster in exchange for food. Though it was a standard feature in the original game, he still doesn't fully grasp how exactly this mechanic works out in the real world. However, Atu tells him they shouldn't sweat the details since they've now established a reliable method to produce more creatures to serve the kingdom. She excitedly adds that it's about time they moved on to the next phase of their plan, and Takuto agrees, mentioning he'll summon a hero as soon as they've stockpiled enough mana. Excited, Atu asks who he plans to summon, and Takuto casually replies that he's thinking about calling Isla, Queen of the Bugs. Atu nods, saying that's definitely a solid choice. while Takuto enthusiastically starts explaining Aisla's perks. She can buff all insect-type monsters, allowing them to dominate on the front lines, and she can also produce larvae to handle mundane tasks, providing essential support to the kingdom on multiple fronts. Atu appreciates that he clearly put serious thought into this choice, and Takuto sheepishly admits that Aisla was honestly the only safe option available, since the other potential heroes are completely unhinged. Atu wholeheartedly agrees, joking that the other heroes would require years of intensive therapy. Takuto chuckles in response, acknowledging he hopes to summon them eventually, but definitely not anytime soon. Meanwhile, Lornias and the group finally arrive at the Dark Continent, quickly running into their first major threat, and it's a towering hill giant. Lornias immediately tries to command the mercenaries into a defensive formation, but Wardell cuts him off, telling them all to chill because he'll handle this big guy himself. He bluntly adds that they don't have time to waste, and it'll be faster if everyone just stays out of his way. The rest of the group watches in awe as Wardell calmly walks toward the hill giant with his sword drawn, completely unfazed by its monstrous size. Wardell channels holy energy into his blade while the giant, oddly polite, waits patiently until he's done. When the giant finally swings his massive club, Wardell casually blocks the blow and slices right through it like it's made of cardboard. Not missing a beat, he launches himself at the stunned monster, delivering a whirlwind of rapid slashes before the giant even has a chance to process what's happening. With the giant crashing down lifelessly, Wardell casually strolls back to his teammates like he just finished a casual morning workout. Lornias is absolutely hyped, immediately praising Wardell and confidently declaring that their mission is practically in the bag now that they've got him. But Wardell's serious expression quickly sobers everyone up, making Lornias uneasy with his skepticism. Meanwhile, back in Minara, Takuto is happily munching down on a burger when Atu gently nags him to eat something healthier. Takuto playfully protests, reminding her that he spent way too long in the hospital surviving on boring, flavorless health food. So now he's determined to explore all the tasty junk food life has to offer. He then gets a little worried when he realizes Atu herself has been surviving exclusively on salads for days, but she reassures him that this diet suits her just fine. They chat for a while about how quickly construction has progressed lately, when Takuto suddenly remembers something important. He asks Atu to call Moltar and the others once they're finished eating, since the new scout bugs they recently created have completed mapping the nearby areas. He reveals that he's planning to deal with a human settlement they discovered nearby, asking Atu first to confirm if the town belongs to the Holy Kingdom of Qualia. She's fairly confident the settlement is independent and aligned neutrally, which is a huge relief for Takuto, since it means negotiation might actually be possible. Takuto optimistically hopes nothing disastrous occurs during their interaction, and Atu jokes that he's definitely jinxing them by even mentioning it. Takuto laughs confidently, assuring her nothing crazy like that could happen. But of course, at that very moment, he receives an urgent message from one of the bugs. An armed group is heading directly toward their forest. Takuto instantly grows serious, instructing Atu that they should try resolving things peacefully if possible, but if push comes to shove, it better be prepared to throw down. At the same time, the armed group making their way into the forest is none other than Lornia's and Wardell's crew. As they push deeper, Wardell suddenly raises a hand, signaling everyone to stop because he sensed someone's presence approaching them. Sure enough, Atu emerges from the trees wearing dark clothes that completely conceal her identity. Wardell immediately demands she identify herself, and Atu calmly claims she's a dark elf who's found refuge here alongside her people because there's nowhere else safe for them to go. Wardell acknowledges her situation but bluntly tells her to step aside because their group has orders to investigate this forest. Atu firmly responds that they shouldn't go any further, causing Wardell's instincts to flare up, sensing something shady going on. But before he can say more, Lornias rudely jumps into the conversation, yelling at Atu and demanding how she dares disobey a servant of God. Wardell sharply snaps at him, telling him to shut his mouth and stop interrupting. Lornias is visibly frustrated at being rebuked over such a trivial issue, but Wardell swiftly resumes his conversation with Atu, explaining they cannot turn back simply because she asked them to, then pointedly asks if there's something she's trying to hide within the forest. She insists there's nothing here but elves who simply wish to live peacefully and questions why he's so hell-bent on invading this godforsaken forest. After a moment of hesitation, Wardell sighs and finally reveals their reason. The Saintess recently had a vision of an immense evil hiding here, and thus he cannot return until he verifies this personally. The mercenaries gasp in shock, having been kept in the dark about such a critical detail. Lornias immediately starts flipping out, demanding to know how Wardell could casually spill classified information like it's some local gossip. Wardell snaps back at him again, shouting that sometimes secrets must be shared openly. But Lornias, furious and flustered, angrily retorts that even a high-ranking paladin like Wardell doesn't have the authority to reveal divine prophecies without permission from their superiors. However, Wardell politely asks Atu if they can at least take a quick look inside the forest, but suddenly her attitude completely shifts as she bluntly tells them there's absolutely nothing inside that's worth their precious time. She firmly urges them to turn back immediately, but Lornias grows furious at the sheer audacity of a dark elf daring to defy a divine prophecy. He senses the air around Atu shifting ominously, confirming his suspicions that something deeply sinister lurks within the woods that they must investigate no matter what. However, Wardell appears open to negotiation. Trying to de-escalate the tension, he calmly asked Atu to swear on her own god that no threat to the holy kingdom of Qualia is hiding in the forest. Atu readily takes the oath, even swearing by her deity, and it's actually they who fear Qualia far more than Qualia could ever fear them. Satisfied by this, Wardell announces they're retreating, much to Lornius' complete disbelief. Lornius immediately protests, insisting it's blatantly obvious that the woman is hiding something crucial. But Wardell just snaps at him, calling Lornius a faithless coward and telling him to stop projecting his own paranoia onto others. He declares that they found absolutely nothing of concern, officially ending their investigation. With that, Wardell begins walking away confidently, but Lornius has finally reached his boiling point. Refusing to let Wardell make another reckless decision, he sternly informs Wardell that he's officially revoking his authority as a high paladin for casually spilling a divine prophecy to an enemy and abandoning his sacred duties. He swiftly orders the mercenaries to follow him deeper into the forest to uncover the evil hidden within. Bargo quickly agrees, mostly because Lornius is the guy signing their paychecks, and there's no arguing with money. Atu desperately pleads with them one final time to stop, but Lornius coldly ignores her and commands his men to capture her immediately, even as Wardell shouts at him not to escalate the situation further. Atu lets out a weary sigh, sadly acknowledging that peaceful negotiations have collapsed into utter failure. Seconds later, the mercenaries suddenly find themselves skewered on Atu's spikes, transformed into human kebabs before they can even blink. Lornius himself was knocked out, and when he woke, he never even comprehended what hit him. And the only one who did see everything and is still alive is Wardell, and he shouts at Lornius that they're dealing with an actual freaking witch. Atu then calmly sheds her disguise, remarking regretfully how unfortunate it was that peaceful talks had to end so violently. Turns out more of those bastards are still alive, and Wardell immediately yells for someone to report this freaking mess to the kingdom. But Bargo shuts that down real quick because every last messenger they had already got their asses impaled by Atu. And the surviving mercenaries aren't even close to fast enough to make the trip in time, especially not with Atu currently in full-on impaling asses mode. With zero options left, Wardell tells everyone to grab their damn weapons because now they've got no choice but to fight. He commands the mercenaries to unload everything they've got, so they fire a volley of arrows, but Atu effortlessly deflects them all like she's brushing lint off her coat. Wardell curses his luck, knowing full well that the absolute last person he wanted to go up against was Atu, and funny enough, she's just as annoying to be dealing with him. She makes it painfully clear this entire situation is Lornius' fault because if they had just agreed to leave the forest alone, she would have let them walk away. But no, Lornius had to get all noble and damn self-righteous, and now she's got no choice but to kill him. Lornius finally realizes he screwed up royally and turns to Wardell, asking if he even knows what the hell this freaking thing really is. Wardell admits he suspected something was off from the moment they first saw her, which is exactly why he wanted to leave without throwing hands. But now that he's seen her true form up close, he's certain Atu is a witch, but not the storybook kind either. Because a witch in this world is a certified calamity-class monster, officially recognized as a national-level threat. Someone like her is way out of the mercenaries' league, so Wardell orders them to fall back and leave this to him and Lornius. Both men charge Atu, reciting their sacred prayers to power up their attacks. Atu doesn't take them seriously at first, just blocks their strikes and mocks them for being so weak. But then they actually manage to slice through two of her tentacles, and suddenly she realizes this might not be the cakewalk she thought. She quickly figures out their holy magic is giving them bonus damage against her demonic body, and Wardell assumes that if they just cut off all her tentacles, she'll be helpless. Not wanting that to happen, Atu grabs two of the nearby mercenaries and takes them hostage, using their bodies as meat shields to stall their assault. But Wardell coldly tells Lornius that if they don't stop Atu now, she could eventually turn her wrath toward Qualia, and for the sake of the entire nation, sacrifices have to be made. Lornius hates the idea, but he grits his teeth and agrees. With zero hesitation, both men charge forward again, slicing through the hostages and Atu's final two tentacles in one clean, ruthless strike. And she was honestly surprised they had the balls to slice through their own allies like that. And for a brief moment, it even looks like she might actually be in trouble. But no, because this whole thing has just been a damn joke to her. 1 second later, a fresh wave of tentacles erupts from the ground like weeds on steroids, and Wardell is instantly skewered multiple times like a pincushion. With blood pouring from his wounds, Wardell uses his final breath to shout for Lornius to get the hell out of here. But that makes Atu annoyed, so she silences him for good with a tentacle straight through the skull. Lornius is frozen in disbelief, absolutely rattled, because he was certain that chopped off all of Atu's tentacles, which they did, but Atu never once said she couldn't grow more. In fact, she's been able to summon an unlimited number this entire time, but she just didn't feel like it. She's been toying with them like a bored cat swatting at bugs. After witnessing Wardell get brutally annihilated, the remaining mercenaries completely lose their will to fight. And judging by the freaking look on Atu's face, she has zero intention of sparing any of them. Seeing no other choice, Lornius yells for everyone to scatter and run in different directions, hoping at least one of them can escape and warn the kingdom about what really went down here. So the mercenaries immediately drop their weapons and bolt like their asses are on fire. Atu surprisingly doesn't bother chasing them. She just watches them go, sighing in annoyance, wishing they'd done that in the first place because it would have saved her a ton of effort. Lornias, however, stays behind, determined to keep her occupied. He then charges her with everything he's got, holy sword gleaming. But to his utter horror, Atu blocks the strike flawlessly, using the exact same holy sword technique. He stumbles back, unable to comprehend how a monstrous creature like her could possibly have access to a sacred technique meant only for the pure. Normally, that would have been impossible, but Atu coolly explains that when she killed Wordle, she absorbed all of his experience and sword skills. Every ounce of training, every technique, now hers. With a grin, she begins attacking Lornias using Wordle's own moves, mocking him as she does. She even praises Wordle, saying he was truly worthy of being called elite, but sadly he died because Lornias couldn't keep his damn mouth shut. Then she leans in, taunting him, asking if he ever thought about making it home to his wife and daughter. That's when the blood drains from Lornias' face because he never said a word about his family. That's when it hits him. She can just take Wordle's skills, she took his damn memories too, and if Atu can do that, then every kill just makes her even more terrifying. She then casually asks Lornias if he's curious about Wordle's final thoughts before she finished him off. Turns out, unlike a selfish bastard like Lornias, Wordle was genuinely concerned for the lives of his men right up until his last breath. Lornias desperately tries defending himself, saying the other mercenaries have already fled to report back to the kingdom, claiming their mission wasn't a complete disaster. But Atu just chuckles coldly, calmly telling him all those mercenaries are already dead. She admits she wasn't in the mood to chase them herself, but that didn't mean she'd just let them run off. Besides, she never said she was alone. She already ordered her dark elves to hunt down every single merc who tried to escape, and now they're nothing but corpses in the dirt. Lornias is hit by a wave of despair, realizing he's the last one standing. Driven by panic, he takes one final pathetic swing at Atu's head, and she savors every bit of his agony. Within seconds, she's effortlessly subdued him. But instead of ending him right away, Atu cruelly twists the knife, vividly describing how things could have turned out if he'd just listened to Wordle. They would have all safely returned home, and Lornias would have seen his wife and daughter again, spending the rest of his life happily oblivious to any horrors lurking in the forest. But no, Lornias had to play hero. So now she's going to kill him, and then she's got to hunt down his family too, just because she can. Atu reveals she can easily pluck the image of his wife and daughter right from his memories, names, faces, address, everything, and she's absolutely petty enough to follow through. Hell, she might even slaughter every single person living in the villages Lornias passed on his way here. And while each of them is dying the most painful death imaginable, she'll make damn sure they know it was Paladin and Lornias who brought hell down on them. Lornias screams, desperately begging her not to do it, but Atu's already bored of his whining, finally putting an end to him just to shut him up. Right after Lornias hits the ground, Nagi comes up to inform Atu that all the escaping mercenaries have been dealt with, so there won't be any survivors to spread word of today's events. Atu calmly thanks Nagi for his efficiency and instructs him to handle disposing of the corpses too. But before Atu can leave, Nagi hesitantly asks if she's serious about her plan to slaughter Lornias' family and anyone he's ever crossed paths with. Atu just laughs, saying she was just talking smack to scare the hell out of Lornias before finishing him off. She clarifies that mass genocide is way too exhausting, and besides, she's a self-proclaimed peace lover. So starting pointless fights is just too exhausting for her tastes, and she's not about that life unless someone forces her hand. With that out of the way, she cuts the chat short because she urgently needs to talk to Takuto. Moments later, Atu approaches Takuto and shares something odd she noticed before the fight. Wordle called her a witch despite her clearly being classified as a hero. He also rambled something about a witch causing trouble up north. Takuto is confused because there was never any witch class in the game they came from, prompting Atu to suggest that this world must differ significantly from the one they're familiar with. Takuto nods thoughtfully, having already suspected that. While many of the game's mechanics remain intact, they're better off assuming the underlying rules have fundamentally changed. Luckily, the differences aren't entirely negative because Atu's ability to absorb skills from those she kills has gotten a massive upgrade. Now she also inherits fragments of their memories which allow them to gather valuable intel from Quelia's scouting team. And according to those memories, Quelia is currently distracted by the northern disturbance, meaning Mainara won't be on their radar anytime soon. Still, the complete annihilation of their scouting party is bound to raise some red flags, prompting Quelia to eventually investigate. Takuto is fully aware of that risk, but since Quelia knows nothing concrete about Mainara yet, he's confident they won't jump straight into a fight unless their leaders have the IQ of Potato. At the moment, he's far more concerned about this northern disturbance and the mysterious witch behind it. Atu tried extracting every detail about witches from Wordle's mind, but the guy was clueless. However, one chilling fact stood out crystal clear. The witch called Arakino is wreaking havoc up north, and she was strong enough to single-handedly deal massive damage to Quelia's forces. At the same time up in the Northern Territory, Arakino's casually finished demolishing yet another village and is already prepping to move on to the next. To top it off, she raises every villager she slaughtered as undead puppets to serve her. Takuto has absolutely no clue about Arakino's true powers, but given that she's causing this much mayhem so soon after arriving, he suspects she might have come from another world, just like him and Atu. If that's the case, things are about to get a whole lot messier. Atu, unsure of their next move, asks Takuto what they should do. Judging by the sheer carnage Arakino's caused, she's clearly evil aligned, which theoretically means they might vibe with her. Atu wonders if maybe they should reach out and see if they can form some kind of alliance, but Takuto immediately shoots that idea down because they have zero intel on what Arakino's personality is like. Atu is frustrated that things had to spiral out of control right when Mainara was finally hitting its stride. Takuto reassures her that Arakino is still far away in the north, meaning she's not their immediate headache. Still, these threats have shown that Mainara desperately needs stronger defenses, so Takuto decides he's got to summon another hero and fast. Initially, he had planned to choose Isla, but considering recent developments, he'll probably have to go for a more combat-oriented option. Plus, his original strategy of staying hidden might need rethinking, especially with unpredictable threats like Arakino popping up, so they'll meet a alleged alliance soon. And Qualia is obviously out of the question after Atu brutally wiped out their paladins, but the nation to the east looks promising. They're neutral, haven't interacted with Mainara yet, and seem like potential ally material. So once the palace construction wraps up, Takuto plans on heading over there himself to size them up and see if teaming up is viable. At the same time, over in that very same eastern city, they're getting slammed by a barbarian attack. Fortunately, their badass staff wielder annihilates the attackers effortlessly with a massive lightning strike. Citizens start cheering and praising her for protecting them, but she quickly reminds everyone it's way too early to celebrate because there's clearly a lot more trouble on the horizon. Back in Mainara, Atu and Takuto finish up their discussion, and as she's about to head out, she pauses, awkwardly apologizing for getting a bit carried away with the paladin earlier. She knows Takuto usually prefers avoiding unnecessary bloodshed, but Takuto just gives her a blank stare, calmly asks her why on earth she thinks he'd be bothered by that. That's when it hits her. Takuto might seem gentle, but at the end of the day, he's literally the physical embodiment of evil, so there's not much violence in this world that's gonna bother him. Not long after, work on Takuto's castle wraps up, and it feels like the first real push in his realm's rise. His heart jumps since a vast residence has been his quiet wish for years, and Atu promises with a grin that one day it will grow tall enough to stare at the sky. Anyway, all the talk about halls and courtyards makes her notice something awkward. He may be the monarch, yet he has not a single personal aide, and although he never really considered it, a ruler without attendants looks strange, so Atu asks what kind of servant he would prefer so she can recruit one for him. Takuto answers with a shy smile that anyone is fine as long as they are easy to speak with, since he is terrible at conversation. He has barely exchanged more than a few words with the Dark Elves since arriving, which Atu says is mostly because he comes off to them like a dense cloud of gloomy energy. Even so, she tells him to relax because she already has a perfect plan in mind. Her enthusiasm makes his stomach knot, yet he swallows the worry and decides to let it play out to see what she does. Atu promptly calls Nagi, Molter, and Emil, then orders them to assemble every little girl in the village because the king desires them. Takuto and Molter both freeze at the wording, and Molter, trying to be fair, asks why she issued such a command. Atu's reasoning is that younger girls would be gentler partners while Takuto practices small talk, but instead of saying it plainly, she blurts that Takuto likes little girls. That goes too far, so Takuto cuts her off before she adds anything worse and tells her to explain herself properly without making him sound like a lolicon. Once the full explanation is out, Molter and the others exhale in relief since the king only wants an approachable attendant. He requested younger candidates because the kingdom is short on manpower, and he refuses to pull skilled adults from vital work just to serve him. Children who are not doing heavy labor yet seem like the least disruptive option, which is why he asked for them. Impressed by how considerate he is, Molter's group agrees to bring suitable children to meet him, and Takuto actually feels hopeful about finally having people he can talk with each day. There is one detail he forgot to account for, and it hits the instant the kids arrive. To ordinary villagers, he still looks like a disaster in human shape, his aura heavy enough to spook anyone, so the moment the children see him, they burst into tears. Takuto feels crushed after the fiasco with the children, and seeing his expression, Atu turns to Moltar and asks if there are any little ones who wouldn't burst into tears at the sight of their king. Given how things stand, Moltar cannot name a single safe choice. Nagi then asks whether Takuto has met the twins yet, but Moltar admits that he kept them away because he doubted they would be suitable attendants. Their history is rough and he feared they might accidentally offend the king. But options are running thin, so Atu tells him to call them in regardless. A short while later, the twins step into the hall and introduce themselves as Karia and Maria. Karia bows with careful respect, voice steady, while Maria talks to Takuto in a breezy, familiar tone like she is chatting with an old friend. Atu reads the weariness in their eyes and the wariness in their posture, then gently asks Karia about the sores on her skin. Karia says they came from an illness, and Molter explains that she suffered through a plague some time ago. The sickness has passed, but the marks it left behind did not fade. Atu asks what scarred Maria, and Karia answers that her sister endured something cruel and has never been the same since. Atu asks what she means, so Maria answers without hesitation that she ate her mother. The words hit like a slap, far worse than Atu expected, so she turns to Moltar for an explanation. He says he is not proud of what happened, but in that moment it was the only path left, and the Dark Elf tribe still honors the sacrifice that Karia and Maria's mother made for them. Hearing that, Takuto remembers the long exile across brutal ground after the elves were driven out. In marches like that, hunger becomes a tyrant, and sometimes survival demands impossible choices, and the thought leaves his chest so tight. Being forced to eat her own mother cracked Maria's view of the world. The small grace is that she shows no fear of Takuto at all. Though the two is uncertain, she would make a stable attendant. But while the two weighs the idea, Maria pads over to the throne. Standing close, she peers up and says he looks white to her. Takuto blinks at that, surprised since almost everyone else describes him like walking darkness. But Maria sees something different. With a smile, he asks if she would be willing to serve as his attendant and look after him, and Maria nods and says she will try her best. So Takuto formally appoints her as his servant, and also as a candidate for leadership within the Great Minara. Atu is astonished because that is the longest back and forth Takuto has ever managed with anyone besides her. But despite Maria seeming willing, Karia has barely spoken, so Takuto gently asks for her thoughts on the offer. Karia says that as Maria's younger sister, she is duty-bound to stay at her side, and if Maria wishes to serve as Takuto's attendant, then Karia will stand with her and do the same. The answer makes Takuto visibly happy, and he tells them that starting today, they are responsible for looking after him, while Nagi and Molter trade uneasy looks at the choice. When the others file out, Molter approaches the throne and says there is something he must share about the twins. Since the day their mother died, they have not been able to feel even the smallest emotion, as if their hearts shut tight to survive. Keeping them as attendants will bring its own set of problems, yet Molter asks that Takuto meet those challenges with patience and tolerance until the girls slowly open up again. The next morning, Maria and Karia begin their official service, and the anicaps start right away. Maria walks in with a glass of water, catches her own toes, and splashes the whole thing on Takuto. Karia quickly offers a cloth, apologizing for her sister's slip, because this is not the only time something like this shit has happened. But Takuto calmly says it is fine and that he is not angry. Moments later, Atu enters, disappointed to see that Maria has botched another simple task, but Takuto asks her to go easy on them. Atu hates how often they fumble, yet if the king refuses to punish them, there is nothing she can do. She then reminds Takuto that he has a meeting on the schedule, and since they are his attendants, Maria and Karia are required to be present too, so they need to keep their manners tight. The council gathers soon after, and Emil delivers the first report. She oversees construction, and with the palace finished, they now have a surplus of workers available. There is also a large stock of materials still in storage, so they are in a strong position to launch another project right away. Takuto and Atu back Emil's recommendation and authorize construction of a clinic at once, since they urgently need a place that safeguards the health and safety of Minara's citizens. Emil answers that she will mobilize crews immediately, and with building matters set for the moment, Atu asks to hear from whoever oversees resource collection. It turns out Emil also carries that portfolio, which means they will likely need to expand staff soon. She reports that gathering food and raw materials is proceeding smoothly, and thanks to Takuto's assistance, they have been securing daily necessities the nation cannot produce on its own. However, that method burns through a great deal of Takuto's mana, so alternative supply routes must be found soon. Because leaning on emergency production this often is not perfect, but for now, it is a critical cost. Takuto answers without hesitation that they can keep leaning on him, then adds that they must prioritize buildings and research that raises mana output so the burden eases over time. Atu then thanks Emil for the grind and moves the agenda to magic research. Molter rises to deliver his report. He has successfully devised military magic. But at the moment, he alone can wield it, but with enough practice, he is confident his subordinates will learn to do the same. And they may even be able to cast stronger spells by tapping the palace's supply of ruined mana. But since Takuto has made it clear he does not intend to start wars, opportunities to use that power should be rare. But for now, Atu instructs Molter to concentrate on the 6 major elements in the magic skill tree, because those branches will best support national development. Then Atu asks Nagi for the army update, and he reports that their forces currently field 5 scout bugs, and most of their time has gone to mapping the unknown reaches of the accursed land. The terrain outside the forest is largely open plains, which lets them probe that region with a lower chance of being seen. Even so, stealth remains a top priority for Minara right now, so the scouts are operating under strict limits on how far and how boldly they can range. Atu says it is fine since they already have a thorough survey of the forest in hand, then tells Maggie to put the scouts on routine sweeps along the woodland perimeter. He asks if she truly wants every bug shifted to patrol duty, and she can read the worry about their current fighting strength. She answers that she alone can swat any threat that shows up, and on top of that, she and Takuto have already settled on creating a new hero, and Takuto adds that they will go ahead and summon Ezla after all. Takuto then asks whether all the prerequisites have been gathered, so Molter reports that timber and rations are stocked and ready, though the heavy mana cost is still an issue. After plenty of back and forth and a little compromise, the council wraps and Takuto feels quietly proud of how well everyone is carrying their load. He then heads toward the throne chamber, papers in hand, when Maria bumps into him and sends the meeting documents skittering across the floor. Karia bows, apologizes for her sister, and hurries to help gather the pages, only for the two of them to tub the same sheet and tear it clean in half. They glance up, bracing for a scolding, but Takuto simply tells them it is all right and takes his seat without raising his voice. Maria steps closer and asks him straight if he is a bad person. By alignment, he counts as evil, so she follows by asking why he has not killed them yet. They have been bungling constantly and pulling mistakes that would get servants executed, yet he keeps sparing them, and they cannot comprehend why. So Takuto asks what they think separates a good person from a bad one. Maria answers that a good person only does good deeds and a bad person only does bad, but he tells her that is only half true. A good person must keep choosing the right thing, so they do not lie, they do not steal, and they do not kill without cause. But a bad person does not have to do the worst thing every time because they act out of self-interest and do what they want, whether others like it or not. In his case, what he wants is to treat them gently, so there's nothing wrong with letting small mistakes slide. And he adds that he already noticed they have been staging some of those blunders on purpose to try to make him furious. The sisters finally confess that all the mistakes were deliberate. They kept poking at boundaries, hoping he'd lose his temper and end them because in their heads, what they did means they don't deserve to keep living. Takuto understands why self-forgiveness feels unreachable after something like that. He can't truly stand in their shoes that he's certain their mother chose that sacrifice, so her daughters would continue, not vanish. He tells them plainly that they are free, and the truest way to honor her choice is to live fully, not shrink into guilt. The road ahead will be rough and uneven, and some days will ache more than others, but he promises to stay beside them at every single step and shoulder what he can. The sisters crumble, tears pouring as they wrap him in a tight embrace, clinging until the storm in their chests eases. A few hours later, Atu walks in and finds both girls asleep across Takuto's throne. A tiny flash of jealousy pricks her, but business comes first, and she reports to him that the survey on the nearby city is done. The nearby city is called Dragonten, and it belongs to Fonkaven, a neutral nation where multiple races live side by side. So Takuto thinks that this diversity should make talks and trade more manageable with them. But he also flags a concern because Dragonten sits way off the trade path, and that location worries him. Atu explains the reason for that location. There's a dragon vein mine beneath the area, and those veins are prized since they naturally generate mana. Strategically, securing such a source early would be huge, so she recommends moving to safeguard it as soon as they can do so wisely. But the report also notes that Dragonten is currently under assault by barbarian groups like ogres and goblins, and the defenders are clearly struggling to hold the line. Takuto asks whether the city has received any backup from its homeland. And as far as Atu can tell, no reinforcements have been dispatched, so conditions are improving, and if anything, they're sliding. Given that picture, he assumes refugees are already on the roads. If Minara opens its gates and shelters those people, they can strengthen their population while building goodwill with Dragonten, and down the line, that partnership could place the Dragon Vein mine within Minara's reach. Takuto then orders Atu to assemble an envoy at once, but on the road to the city, Atu's party runs into a band of beastkin in the middle of the wilds, and the tension spikes. Tonukapali, their leader, is terrified of Atu and the others, since the darkness so dense it's visible clings to them. She works hard to keep things calm because her men are so petrified they might lash out at the two in fear, and that could get everyone eliminated. Atu is still under strict orders to keep Minara a secret, so she is preparing to erase every witness on the spot. Yet Pepe is too oblivious to grasp the danger she represents, and he casually asks her name and strikes up a conversation, a move so brazen and foolish that it catches Atu off guard and makes her stay her hand for now. In time, the two groups manage to reach an understanding, and Atu learns that Tonukapoli's party is actually an envoy from Dragonten. That turns out to be a lucky break since it saves her the trip, so she invites Tonukapoli and her people to come meet the king of Minara. Tonukapoli is a little on edge since any king who can command someone as vigorous as Atu is bound to be frightening. And when she finally meets Takuto, it is worse than she imagined because all she can perceive is an endless gulf of darkness, so she's really starting to regret the choice she made before. Then we see that before they cross paths with Atu, the group had been attacked by a giant out in the barren lands. So Pip, one of the staff bearers, used grass magic to locate the giant and drag it down. Sadly, with brain power apparently stuck in the single digits, he doesn't think things through, so instead of finishing the damn job, he stands on its chest and starts demanding applause for his magic. And predictably, the giant tears free and flings Pape aside. But just before it can crush him, Tonukapoli steps in and weaves grass and earth magic together, pinning the giant hard against a rock, then tells her men to kill it. Tonukapoli then turns around and smacked the shit out of Peep's head, and told him to quit acting like a damn fool, because as the lone junior staff bearer, people's lives may one day hinge on his choices. Peep says he will try his best, yet he plainly fails to grasp how serious his role is. If giants keep battering Dragonten, it is only a matter of time before the city is wiped out, and they have no clue what is provoking the attacks in the first place. Their lone lead is a rumor about a calamity surfacing in the accursed lands, so Tonukapoli said she planned to investigate and drill a little responsibility into Pepe while she was at it. She dragged him along, and now she regrets that choice because one wrong move from him could get them all executed. Soon after, Peg blurts out and asks Takuto to be friends, and Tonukapoli panics, and speaking so brazenly to a king could merit execution. She apologizes and tries to cover for his outburst. But to her shock, Takuto actually seemed pleased by the offer and says he would be happy to be friends with him. Afterward, a welcoming banquet is prepared for Pepe and Tonukapoli's party, and once everyone takes their seats, Maria and Carria bring each of them a glass of apple juice. Tonukapoli sips and is astonished because she has never tasted anything this good, and the quality of the glassware here surpasses the work of the finest artisan on the continent. Pape loves the juice too, so he asks Maria for another pour, and before the extra drink even arrives, he bounds out of his chair and starts praising Maggie for his massive muscles. Then he goes to show off his magic to Moltar, and everyone lets him do as he likes, since Takuto seems fond of him. Takuto is struck by how effortlessly social Pepe is in any situation, and he is glad they managed to become friends, but he has never actually had a friend before and does not quite know what friends are supposed to do together. Then, while Tanukapali scolds Pepe, Takuto caught his attention and asks whether he would like to play a game. The room falls silent for a moment because no one expected those words, and Takuto begins to feel awkward. Then Pepe cheerfully agrees to play with him, so the two of them sit down together to play. They start with a game Pepe invents on the spot, where each of them takes a single blade of grass and they tug against each other to see which strand snaps first. Tanukapali fears Takuto might feel slighted by such a simple pastime, yet he's clearly having a great time. They keep playing for a while, and Pepe tries several of the games Takuto dreamed up. He says it was a blast and even suggests Takuto could sell them in Dragonten, but Tanukapali slices him off because it isn't Pepe's damn place to make important decisions on behalf of their city like that. Takuto is actually relieved that Pepe mentioned trade, since he's been planning to open negotiations with Dragonten for some time. But before he can move forward, he knows he'll have to put aside their personal friendship and approach the matter purely as a ruler. After they finish eating, Atu calls Tanukapali over and asks her straight out why she came to the accursed lands in the first place. The question clearly unsettles her, but she answers honestly. Her homeland has been under relentless assault from the barbarians. Atu is startled that the barbarians are striking Dragonten when they typically steer clear of big cities, and Tanukapali says that is exactly why she came to uncover what could be driving their behavior. Takuto then asks if that means Dragonten lacks the military strength to fight the barbarians effectively, and Tanukapali's pulse jumps because if he learns how bad things are in Dragonten, Minara might decide to overthrow them rather than negotiate. She lies and says Dragonten still has sufficient power to drive the barbarians off, while insisting their unusual movements demanded inquiry regardless. Her explanation convinces everyone that Dragonten can still handle itself. But then Pepe, bless his big mouth, blurts out that he's confused, since earlier Tanukapali told him they were here because Dragonten would be doomed if they don't learn why the barbarians are attacking. Edo can't help pitying Tanukapali for having to wrangle Pepe constantly, but she and Takuto make it plain that they have no designs on Dragonten so she can relax. For the moment, their attention is fixed on internal rebuilding, so launching wars or swallowing neighbors isn't on the agenda. The barbarians, though, are a different matter, and that threat cannot simply be shrugged off. Because if Dragonten were to collapse under the barbarians, Minara sits next door and would be the next target, which makes the problem theirs too. Tanukapali is startled and asks if that means they're prepared to step in, because after overstretching to build a town by the Dragon Vein, Dragonten will topple if nothing changes. Atu turns to Takuto for the call, and he says he wants to stand by his friend, so he is willing to provide whatever aid is needed. Thrilled, Tanukapali still asks what he wants in return, since the idiot Pepe has already blurted how damn desperate Dragonten's situation is. Atu answers without ceremony that they want the Dragon Vein and Tanukapali, and pray that it would not come up, yet in her current bind she cannot refuse. Atu adds that there is no need to fret since she and Takuto are fine with joint stewardship of the Dragon Vein with Dragonten. For now their man-to-man is small, but they want the exclusive right to decide the Vein's elemental conversion. That revelation stuns Tanukapali, because Minara already has the method to convert raw mana into elemental power, a milestone that would have taken Dragonten 10 more years. It becomes obvious that Minara's society is well ahead of theirs, so an alliance would pay huge dividends. Even so, tradition says the call belongs to Pepe. And he may be a fool at times, yet as the youngest staff bearer, he is by extension the nation's future ruler. He also reads people well, so she asks if he wants to proceed with the alliance, and Pepe says he wants to be buddies with everyone in Minara. And with that settled, the two realms make the alliance official. Not long after, Atu convenes a strategy session to lock in the terms with Dragonten. Minara will ship a stream of consumables to their city, and in return, Dragonten will deliver metalware and everyday essentials. Moltar welcomes the arrangement. Until now they had leaned on Takuto to furnish those supplies, but the standout gain is direct access to the Dragon Vein. Credit also goes to Pepe, because if he hadn't blurted out Dragonten's true condition, Tanukapali's bluff confidence would have held and diplomacy would have gone nowhere. In that case, Dragonten might have collapsed long before Minara could lend any help. Takuto even wonders if Pepe is actually a fool or if he nudged events on purpose to reach the best result. Switching topics, Atu says they need a plan for managing relations with Dragonten from here on. Maria and Courier trade puzzled looks and ask whether anyone actually knows what Dragonten is like as a country. They chase the negotiations so hard they forgot they have never set foot there, and real alliance maintenance means understanding an ally's culture and values. When Takuto was playing the game, forging friendship took a single tap, so it never occurred to him that keeping it now would demand sustained effort. Given the gaps, Atu proposes their first move be to scout the capital Crescent Moon, even though it sits far from Minara. However, a detailed look would take quite a while, so Takuto suggests postponing that for now, since the immediate priority is helping Dragonten repel the giants. Even so, Molter reminds them that visiting another nation isn't something you just do, there are protocols to follow. Maria and Curia then raise their hands and ask if they could simply go for fun, and childish as it sounds, the idea is actually smart. If they treat it as a friendly call before sending an official mission, they can set out immediately. Molter then volunteers to go, but Takuto feels he is far too senior to serve as a courier. To the other side, Molter would read as Minara's top arcane chancellor, which makes him a non-starter. The same logic applies to Nagi and Emil, whose posts are equally critical. What they need is a trusted face that Takuto can vouch for, who is not overly high in rank. And right on cue, Maria and Curia lift their hands to volunteer. Takuto turns the idea down on the spot, worried the trip could be risky. Spatu offers to take the assignment, but Molter reminds her she is Takuto's most trusted confidant, and aside from Takuto, arguably the most indispensable person present. Maria and Curia then step up to Takuto and remind him that he granted them the freedom to make their own choices. So right now they want to do everything they can to help him, even if it is risky. Takuto hesitates to approve the mission, but he cannot bring himself to refuse those earnest faces, so he eventually agrees to let them go. And Atu sulks, jealous that Takuto yielded to someone else's cuteness. Emil still voices concerns about sending the pair alone. Takuto says it is fine since he already has skill escorts in mind. After the council breaks, Takuto returns to the throne room, and Atu is still pouting about his capitulation to Maria and Curia's request, leaving him unsure how to proceed. He turns to Maria for advice, and she says he should tell Atu exactly how he feels, so he decides to give it a try. He walks up to Atu and apologizes for making her feel uncomfortable. But she does not need to fear about being replaced because he is extremely thankful for everything Atu does for him and for the fact that she is always at his side. So he tells her there is no one he would rather be with, and that is all Atu needed to hear. In fact, she is already picturing a happily married life with Takuto, and while he has no freaking idea what is running through her head, he is simply glad she is no longer upset. A little later, Takuto leaves Maria, Curia, and Atu to the clinic, though none of them understands why he brought them there since no one is ill. Takuto explains that the clinic was inexpensive to build, so he went ahead and put it up on a whim. But since Maria and Curia will soon head out on a mission, he figures he may as well assign the new plague doctors he created to escort them as protectors. Takuto then opens the door and presents the new doctors, explaining to Maria and Curia that these individuals weren't just skilled in treating wounds and curing ailments, they were also fully trained to fight and defend them during their journey. Atu stepped forward, formally assigning the medics to act as bodyguards during their expedition to Dragonten. Beyond protection, their mission also included observing the local customs and learning as much as they could about the region's way of life. The medics responded with eagerness, promising to integrate smoothly into human society and absorb as much knowledge as possible. Takuto, pleased by their energy, decided to reward their enthusiasm early. He announced their new names, Ichiro, Jiro, and Saburo. The three were thrilled to receive official titles and expressed their gratitude with excessive excitement, so much so that both Takuto and Atu began second-guessing whether they were the right picks for such an important job. Curia didn't seem too impressed either, but Maria is clearly enjoying the chaos and plays along with their over-the-top behavior. Elsewhere, deep within the city of Dragonten, the mayor, a high-strung elf named Antic, was reaching her breaking point after days buried under endless paperwork. She'd accepted the mayoral role hoping to escape the stiff politics of elven society and maybe find a decent guy to settle down with. Instead, she'd ended up with chronic back pain from sitting too long, a growing dependence on alcohol, and a crushing workload. And just to make things worse, she'd recently been informed that she was expected to collaborate with a mysterious group known as the Forces of Darkness, specifically some unknown nation called Minara. Right as she was mid-rent, a knock came from her office door, making her jump. In her frustration, she snapped and told her assistant to leave her alone. Realizing she overreacted, she quickly composes herself and asks what's going on, and her assistant reports that some individuals were waiting to speak with her. Antic asked if they had an appointment, and they didn't, so she scoffed and said her time was far too important to waste on unannounced visitors. But when the assistant mentioned that the guests were representatives from Minara, Antic immediately changed course. Understanding the weight of the visit, she sprang into action, prepared some tea, and headed off to meet Maria and Curia face to face. When Antic arrived at the designated meeting room, she presented herself as Dragonten's mayor and gave her guests a formal welcome. However, the three dark-cloaked figures standing silently behind Maria and Curia immediately unsettled her because she hadn't expected them. She couldn't help but question what Tonukapoli had been thinking when arranging a deal with people like this. Still, it was her duty to handle the situation, so she composed herself, took a seat, and thanked them for making the long journey. Maria and Curia then introduced themselves as official envoys of Minara, and Antic responded with polite compliments, acknowledging their manners. But beneath her composed expression, she was far more focused on the fact that they're dark elves, and that alone would have been enough to make her wary. She also found the trio standing behind them suspicious and silently guessed they were elite assassins. Still, she buried her doubts and continued the meeting with a friendly attitude. She apologized for not arranging a proper reception, explaining that their arrival was unexpected, but Maria and Curia assured her that it wasn't an issue. As Antic reflected, she remembered something Tonukapoli had mentioned before, two dark elf twins being personally trained by the king of Minara, marked as future leaders. Now that they were sitting directly across from her, she felt her nerves spike. One wrong move and she could be responsible for sabotaging Dragontin's diplomatic future. Trying to stay calm, she asked what brought the pair to her city. The question caught Karia off guard since their visit wasn't tied to any official mission, and she struggled to come up with a response. Before the silence grew awkward, Jiro stepped forward and explained that they had come at the invitation of staff bearer Pebe, who had invited them for a visit. He clarified that this was a cultural exchange, more like students on a study tour, and not a formal diplomatic trip. Antic felt a wave of relief. If this wasn't the beginning of any official negotiations, and the pressure was far lower. That made things much easier to handle, but even so, she knew she still had to be cautious not to offend them because one misstep could cause serious fallout. So she smiled and told Maria and Karia they were more than welcome to stay as long as they liked. In fact, she offered to personally show them around the city if they were interested. When the twins asked if that was really all right, Antic reassured them that she knew the city better than anyone and would make an excellent guide. Deep down, she hoped this would help strengthen Dragontin's ties with Minara, and truthfully, it also gave her a perfect excuse to escape her mountain of paperwork, and there was no way in hell she'd pass up a chance like that. The group then sets off into the city, with Antic enthusiastically taking the lead and spending the entire day giving Maria and Karia a full tour of Dragontin. The outing went smoothly, and the atmosphere between them was lively and pleasant. At the same time in Minara, Takuto was swamped with documents of his own, buried under endless administrative work. Even so, he made time to monitor the twins' progress, and seeing that Maria and Kario were enjoying their visit brought him some relief. That evening, after returning to their accommodations, Antic politely took her leave. Once alone, Maria and Karia began reviewing everything they had observed throughout the day. Karia asked for Maria's impressions of the city, and Maria noted that the general mood among the townspeople felt tense. The overall sentiment was one of fear, concerns about food shortages, rumors of an impending enemy assault, and a sense of abandonment. The medics were surprised by how much Maria had picked up, especially since they hadn't seen her interacting with anyone directly. But Maria had a natural ability to read the emotions and atmosphere of others, and her insights were rarely wrong. The trio was impressed, though confused when Jiro remembered something odd. He reached into a pouch and handed Maria a small bag. Inside was a leafy plant, which Maria identified as popple grass, a highly dangerous and addictive substance that most nations had outlawed completely. Jiro explained that he'd unknowingly purchased it from a shady vendor in a narrow back alley, but once he realized what it was, he scolded Maria, telling her to toss it out immediately because narcotics were off limits. However, the bigger concern wasn't that Maria had acquired it, it was how easily accessible the drug had been. Something like popple grass shouldn't have been anywhere near the public, let alone sold so openly. After discussing the situation, they all agreed. Someone within Dragontin had to be cultivating and distributing the illegal herb, and that posed a serious problem. Karia was especially troubled, considering how hard Antic was working to hold the city together, so the idea that this was happening right under her nose was disheartening. Saburo pointed out that the presence of drugs meant things could be even worse beneath the surface, and with such dangerous elements hiding in the city's shadows, they'd need to stay extra alert and focus on keeping Maria and Karia safe, because if something as serious as drug trafficking was happening unchecked, there was no telling what else could be lurking nearby. The following morning, the medics escorted Maria and Karia to visit the Dragon Veen, a place known for its stunning natural beauty. The two were taken aback by the sheer number of glowing crystals scattered across the area, each one sparkling with magical energy. Their awe was interrupted when a stranger approached them. Introducing himself as Vesta, he casually remarked how the terrain here was ideal for cultivating popple grass. Karia responded with courteous formality, greeting him and then firmly requesting he get to the point and explain why he had approached them. Vesta said he heard they were official envoys from Minara. With Dragontin and Minara expected to share control of the region in the future, he thought now would be the perfect time to strike up a business proposal. He offered them a chance to partner with him in growing and distributing popple grass. Karia chose to play along and asked what benefits Minara would gain from such an arrangement. Vesta explained that the drug brought in large profits on the black market, and a fair portion of that revenue would naturally go to Minara. He also hinted at providing other incentives, though when pressed, he said those details were too sensitive to discuss in public. Instead, he handed Karia a marked map and suggested they meet in a more private location to talk specifics. After a moment's pause, Karia accepted the map. Vesta smirked and added that he always found it easier to deal with people on the evil alliance side of things, since they usually understood him better. He complained about the current mayor constantly enforcing ridiculous restrictions like banning narcotics or outlawing human trafficking. But once Minavra's king took over, he was confident the leadership would be far more accepting of his business practices. Several days later, Maria and Karia paid one last visit to Antic before preparing to depart the city. Antic thanked them for their time, saying it had been a pleasure getting to know them during their stay. The twins expressed their gratitude for her hospitality and asked if there was anything they could do in return before leaving. Antic smiled and requested that if possible, they put in a good word for her when they next met with King Takuto, so Maria and Karia agreed without hesitation, promising they'd speak highly of her when the time came. Suddenly, the door to the room swung open and Vesta strutted in with two thugs flanking him. Antic stood up abruptly, furious, and shouted that he had no right to enter without being summoned. But Vesta, as always, showed zero regard for rules or authority, and he'd simply invited himself in. With a smug tone, he said he was only there to receive an answer from Maria and Curia, since they never showed up to the meeting he'd arranged regarding his earlier proposal. Maria calmly asked if he was referring to the ridiculous popple grass partnership he tried to pitch them. Antic's face paled because this was the first she was hearing of any deal between her guests and Vesta, and the idea that Minara might have aligned with someone like him terrified her. Because if Vesta managed to drag that kingdom to his side, it could spell disaster for Dragonton. Maria picked up on Antic's distress and reassured her immediately. She said there was no need to worry because they'd never aligned themselves with filth like Vesta, and they thought it would be obvious to him that their absence from the meeting was their answer. Curia then asked Antic if it would be acceptable for them to handle the situation themselves. Though Vesta was clearly detestable, she wanted to avoid causing an international stir by taking unauthorized action. Antic told them they were free to do as they pleased because Vesta had been a menace to the city for too long, and it was about time someone put him in his place. On cue, the medic stepped forward, ready to deal with him. But strangely, Vesta didn't look intimidated in the slightest. In fact, he grinned with confidence and held up a syringe, and inside were concentrated extracts of the popple plant, and according to him, a single dose was potent enough to turn anyone into a hopeless addict with no will of their own. Maria and Curia exchanged a look because they knew exactly what his plan was and came here intending to use the drug against them, so they asked if he really thought through what he was doing. Sure, they might seem like harmless girls, but laying a hand on them meant declaring war on the kingdom of Minara, and their king Takuto wasn't someone to cross lightly. But Vesta, blinded by arrogance, believed he could simply control the situation. His brilliant plan was to enslave Maria and Curia with the drug and use them to blackmail Takuto. What he didn't factor in was the presence of the 3 loyal guards standing between him and the girls. He handed the sirens to his men and ordered them to seize the twins. But before they could make a move, a sword flew across the room and embedded itself into the wall, mere inches from Vesta's head. Spinning around in shock, he found his henchmen lying in mangled heaps, taken down in an instant. Back in Minara, Takuto was enjoying a peaceful tea break with Atu. He looked quite satisfied, reflecting on how useful the medics had turned out to be during Maria and Curia's mission, because their contribution had far exceeded his expectations. And speaking of them, Emil was still curious about Takuto's decision, and asked why send medics along with the twins instead of a standard squad of warriors. So Atu clarified with a calm smile that the 3 weren't ordinary healers. They adored humans and demi-humans, perhaps a little too much. Though masters of medical science, they had a dark side as well. While they could stitch a body back together with expert care, they also had a habit of snacking on brains every now and then, so when provoked, they were utterly terrifying. At the same time in Dragonton, the so-called medics had just finished slicing Vesta's henchmen apart with clinical accuracy. Now the trio was bouncing gleefully around the room, holding up pieces of flayed skin like prize trophies for their collection. Antic dropped to her knees in horror, paralyzed by the sight of the medic's true nature. So Maria walked over to gently console her, trying to calm her nerves even as the medics danced with a freaking human skin. As for Vesta, no amount of pleading would save him now. Trembling, he begged for mercy. But Curia stepped forward with cold finality. She told him that his involvement in the drug trade wasn't her concern because that alone wouldn't have earned her wrath, but the moment he dared to threaten her sister, tried to use mind-controlled drugs on them, and worst of all, insulted their glorious king Takuto, he sealed his own fate. So without a trace of sympathy, Curia gave the order, and minutes later, Vesta was gone. In his place stood the 3 medics, now cheerfully dressed in fresh skin suits crafted from Vesta himself, and Antic could barely process what she was seeing. So Curia turned toward her and offered a lighthearted apology for the mess in the office. She even asked if Antic would like them to cover the cost of cleaning, but Antic, barely keeping it together after literally shit herself, quietly muttered that it wouldn't be necessary. Curia thanked her warmly for her understanding, flashing a sweet, innocent smile. But in the wake of what just happened, that damn smile felt even more disturbing than the scene of dismembered corpses. At that moment, Antic deeply regretted taking the position of mayor, but it was too late to turn back now because this was her reality, and she'd just have to survive it. Then, as soon as the group returns to Minara, they're immediately summoned to a meeting, where Atu is ready to chew them out for everything that happened. But before she starts laying into the rest, she turns to Takuto and demands to know why he didn't step in, especially since he had been monitoring the whole freaking situation from the start. Takuto sheepishly admits that he didn't want the girls to feel like he was hovering over them, so he let them handle it on their own, but clearly that decision backfired. Atu reminds Maria and Curia that she had specifically told them to keep their violent tendencies in check. Yet despite the warning, they still enthusiastically gave the medics the green light to execute people. As for the medics themselves, even if it was necessary to eliminate Vesta and his men, they went way over the damn line by skinning him alive in front of Antic. Fuming, Atu announces that none of them are allowed to leave until they've each written a thorough apology essay, promising to behave better next time. Several hours later, the team regathers in the strategy room to go over Dragonton's current situation. Based on the intel brought back by the twin scouts, Dragonton is in serious trouble. The city lacks the resources to maintain public order, crime is running rampant, and on top of that, they're constantly under attack from barbarians. According to the report, the enemy forces mostly consist of goblins, orcs, and the occasional hill giant. While the goblins and orcs don't pose much of a threat, the hill giants are becoming a major problem. They've started showing up in small groups around the outskirts, and the frequency of their attacks is increasing steadily, so Dragontan's defenses are struggling to keep up. Molter speculates that part of the issue may be that Dragon lacks the necessary detection capabilities to anticipate these assaults. Normally, the sharp instincts of beastmen would help catch enemy movements early, but their scouts are likely overwhelmed and burned out from the non-stop battles. Regardless, if nothing changes soon, Dragontan is likely to collapse. So Navi suggests dispatching a substantial force from Minara to reinforce the city's defenses. Emil agrees that Dragon needs help, but she's hesitant about splitting up Minara's manpower. Setting out their current labor units would leave critical sectors like agriculture and construction short-staffed. Atu then speaks up, stating that she'll personally be joining the mission, meaning they won't need to send a large number of troops. The others are caught off guard by Atu's decision, but given her ability to absorb skills from enemies, it makes perfect sense that she'd want to be on the front lines. Since she'll be away, someone needs to handle her day-to-day responsibilities, so Molter steps up and offers to take over the administrative workload. And Nagi follows up by volunteering to manage national defense in her absence. But the moment Emil hears that, her expression shifts to concern. Up until now, Minara's entire defense strategy has heavily leaned on Atu being around, and with all due respect, Nagi by himself isn't exactly an impenetrable wall if the nation ends up under siege. Nagi doesn't argue because she's got a point, but thankfully, Takuto had already anticipated this. He tells everyone that he's about to summon Isla, the new hero who will act as the pillar of their defenses while Atu is deployed. Molter thinks the timing couldn't be better because all the required materials Takuto asked for have already been gathered and prepared. The entire group applauds Takuto for thinking ahead and setting things in motion before the need even arose. But in truth, Takuto had no clue things would escalate this fast. It's total luck. But if they want to see him as some strategic genius, he's not going to correct them. And with the key topics settled, Atu turns to Takuto and asks if he has any final comments. The entire planning session went more smoothly than expected, so Takuto was honestly surprised by how easy it all felt. Because back when he used to play the game during his hospital stay, he had to handle everything by himself, and it took a lot of mental effort. But now he has dependable allies by his side. He then tells them they're doing a fantastic job, and his praise fires everyone up to work even harder moving forward. Then once the meeting concludes, Takuto steps outside to the massive pile of resources they spent weeks stockpiling so they can summon Isla. They got to cut back on rations and conserve materials to build this much, but now they're about to see the results of that investment. Maria and Karia ask what kind of person Isla will be, but Takuto admits he doesn't really know. Other than Atu, Isla will be the first hero he's ever summoned into this world, so the outcome is a complete unknown. Atu steps in and swears that if things go sideways, if Isla ever turns on Takuto, she'll do whatever it takes to protect him. Her confidence is enough to calm his nerves, but even so, Takuto gently tells her to look after herself too, because losing her is something he absolutely can't afford. Takuto starts the hero summoning ritual, and as the vast pile of materials is consumed, a glowing cocoon takes shape midair. Isla is about to emerge at any moment, and Takuto braces himself, heart pounding in anticipation. But to his relief, his worry turns out to be unnecessary, because the instant Isla opens her eyes and sees him, she lowers her head in reverence and thanks him for allowing her the honor of addressing him. She formally introduces herself as the sovereign of all insects and pledges unwavering loyalty to Takuto and the kingdom of Minara. Takuto feels a wave of reassurance wash over him because Isla is still on their side, but just to be sure, he gently asks if she remembers who he is. She takes a moment, but soon enough, recognition dawns. She identifies him as the same Takuto who once played the game endlessly, year after year. She beams, clearly happy to see him again, but before their reunion gets too emotional, Atu steps forward and cuts in. She firmly asks Isla if she's truly serious about devoting herself to Takuto in this world. Isla turns to her, remembering her from back then, and smiles. She finds Atu's serious tone amusing and gives her a playful pat on the head. Atu flushes red with embarrassment, insisting she just answered the question already. With a soft laugh, Isla replies that she wouldn't want to serve anyone else. Takuto was the only player who ever unlocked her true potential, so it's a privilege to stand beside him once more. Then shifting gears, she asks Takuto to fill her in on the current state of affairs as she still doesn't know what exactly her role here entails. Sometime later, the three of them are back in the palace and Takuto has just finished explaining everything to her. Isla now fully understands that she's been summoned to act as Minara's defensive hero, allowing Atu to go forward with her expedition without leaving the capital vulnerable. Even though she knows this is the best course of action, Atu can't hide her reluctance. Ever since arriving in this world, she and Takuto have been together constantly. This will be their first extended separation, and she knows they're both going to feel the absence. The following morning, Atu says her goodbyes and heads out for Dragontan with a small unit of soldiers. With her departure, Isla officially steps into her role. She vows to do her part to ensure Takuto enjoys this game of theirs. But after spending just one day with him, she quickly realizes something. Takuto doesn't really do much by himself. It's already midday, and he's still fast asleep on the throne. Maria and Karia then stroll in and casually mention to Isla that Takuto always sleeps in until noon, and when he goes beyond that, it's usually at 2 who wakes him up. Isla frowns, clearly unimpressed, so she turns to Takuto and tells him that, as the king, he's setting a terrible precedent by lazing around that late into the day. She encourages him to start waking up earlier from now on, so Takuto gets a bit embarrassed and promises he'll try to do better. The twins are surprised by how effortlessly Isla got him to comply, especially since Atu typically lets him do whatever he wants without complaint. Seeing the twins also reminds Isla of something she meant to ask, so she turns to Takuto and requests permission to borrow Maria and Karia for the afternoon. Takuto doesn't object, but he does ask why she needs them, so Isla explains that she'd like them to give her a proper tour of the kingdom, since she's still unfamiliar with its layout and wants to understand it better, especially to plan its defense more effectively. Takuto agrees because it's a good idea, so he approves the outing. And while they're on the subject of responsibilities, Isla informs him that his citizens will be arriving soon to request formal approvals from him, so he should be prepared to deal with them properly. Right at that moment, Emil enters the chamber, so Isla and the twins politely excuse themselves, leaving Takuto alone with her. Emil then walks up and hands him a stack of documents, asking him to review the labor division reports for the week. Takuto takes the papers, but immediately feels his nerves spike because this is the first time he's speaking to Emil without Atu or the twins nearby, and he's not sure how to handle it. After a few moments of silence, Emil notices his hesitation and asks if there's an issue with her proposal. Takuto quickly shakes his head and tells her that the report looks solid, and he actually thinks her resource allocation is well balanced. However, he asks that starting next week, she scale back the amount of resource collection because now that Isla has been summoned, they don't need the surplus anymore. So Emil nods in understanding, thanks him for the input, and promises to make the adjustments right away. But Takuto is already mentally drained from that short exchange, and unfortunately, there are still a whole bunch of meetings lined up today, so it's shaping up to be a long one. At the same time, Isla is out strolling with the twins, and she asks them to give her a full tour of the facilities around Managra. The twins begin by showing her the administrative building, where all the documentation and internal affairs are managed. But before they can go any further, they spot Emil rushing around with a visibly stressed expression. Noticing her flustered state, Isla steps forward and gently asks if something's wrong because she seems far too busy for this time of day. Emil explains in frustration that Nagi has been tearing through the training equipment like crazy, and it's completely throwing off her monthly resource planning. Isla softly pats Emil on the head and assures her that everything will be fine. She even offers to personally give Nagi a stern talking to for being so careless with the gear, and Emil immediately feels more at ease. Afterward, the group heads over to the training grounds to wait for Nagi. As soon as he shows up, he bolts across the field, zooms past the soldiers, and dramatically smashes their swords, supposedly to make a point about their poor form. And this was exactly the behavior Emil was venting about earlier, so Isla approaches him calmly and questions whether destroying their equipment was truly necessary just to make his message clear. Nagi quickly starts stumbling through an apology, saying he got a little too into it during the training session and didn't realize how excessive he was being. Isla places a reassuring hand on his head and says it's alright, so long as he understands the damage he caused. Still, she urges him to be more thoughtful moving forward. Just then, a bell rings in the distance, so Isla turns to the twins and asks what the sound means, and they explain that it signals the start of dinner. They invite her to come eat with them, and soon, everyone gathers in the central square for the communal meal. Meals are held like this because it helps reduce waste, because preparing food for everyone at once is far more efficient than having individuals cook separately. The Dark Elves approach Isla and inform her that a grand dinner has been prepared in her honor, should she choose to attend. They insist that she dine with the fine plates and utensils reserved for high-ranking figures, saying it would be improper for someone of her status to use standard cutlery. But Isla gently declines and reminds them that she's the defense hero of the kingdom, and that role means protecting the people. To serve properly, she believes it's essential that she experiences daily life the same way they do. Later in the middle of the night, Isla goes for a quiet walk through town, using the time to brainstorm potential defensive plans for the kingdom. As she passes by Maria and Karia's residence, she hears faint noises coming from inside. Curious, she steps in to investigate and is surprised to find the twins curled up in a corner quietly sobbing. Concerned, Isla gently asks what's wrong, so the girls explain that they had a dream, and now they can't fall back asleep. Isla crouches beside them and softly offers to listen if they want to share. The twins nod and begin describing how every few nights they dream about their mother, replaying all the happy memories they had with her. But every time they wake up, the pain of reality hits again. They remember that she's gone, and that sorrow always lingers afterward. However, they quickly add that since meeting Takuto, those dreams have become far less common. In fact, this was the first time in a long while that it happened, so they reassure Isla that she doesn't need to worry too much. Still, Isla can't help but feel protective, and she gently suggests staying with them for the night, just in case the dreams come back. That way, if they wake up scared or upset again, she'll be right there to comfort them. The twins feel much more at ease with Isla nearby and manage to fall asleep with a sense of security. The following day, Isla meets up with Takuto to go over a few topics. After some discussion, they both agree that establishing a school or academy should be the next step in their construction plans. With no current wars or immediate threats, there's little reason to expand their military. Focusing on education makes more sense right now. While on the subject of conflict, Isla asks how Atu is doing over in Dragonten, so Takuto closes his eyes and taps into their shared connection to check in on her, and what he sees instantly perks him up because Atu seems to be in a rather entertaining situation at the moment. And we see dozens of giants barreling straight toward Atu, and for most people, that would be a nightmare. But for her, it's hardly a challenge. With a relaxed flick of her tentacles in their direction, the entire wave of giants is reduced to bloody chunks in an instant. Antic watches from behind, caught between awe and horror. Honestly, it's more horror, especially since this show of force is even more terrifying than what happened during the medic's incident. Atu notices that Antic looks like she's on the verge of a breakdown, so she kindly tells her that she can take a breather if she wants because there's nothing left to worry about on the front lines, and Antic is clearly relieved and thanks her for the gesture. Later on, Atu takes a seat beside Molter while the townsfolk of Dragonten show unexpected kindness toward them. One of the citizens even brings Atu a refreshing drink to help her relax. Molter had assumed that, after witnessing her full transformation, the people would be too scared to even come near her. But surprisingly, they've adapted quickly. Oddly enough, the credit goes to Pepe, who casually compared her to an octopus when Atu first revealed her real form. Since then, the people of Dragonten have just accepted her as some kind of octopus demi-human. Atu finds that description mildly insulting, but at this point, correcting everyone would be more trouble than it's worth, so she just rolls with it. Shifting focus, Molter asks how her project of absorbing abilities from the fallen giants is going. Atu responds that it's going better than expected. The skill sets these giants possess turned out to be far more impressive than she initially imagined, so she's gotten a lot of mileage out of them, though she still can't figure out how they even gained those skills to begin with. Right then, Atu picks up on something unusual. Her gaze shifts toward the horizon, where she spots a lone giant making its way toward the city. And this leads right back to one of the strange problems surrounding the giants. No matter how much effort they pour into surveillance, no one, not even Atu or Molter, ever notices these giants until they're practically at the city gates. Moments later, Antic rushes in with a report about the incoming threat. She hurriedly informs Atu, but Atu cuts her off mid-sentence, saying there's no need to worry because she'll take care of it personally. And then Atu charges out toward the battlefield, leaving Antic stunned. She worries that Atu might be rushing in without thinking it through, but Molter calmly assures her that no creature as weak as a hill giant could possibly take Atu down. He says they should just stay put, and she'll be back shortly after finishing the job. Still, just standing around would be boring, so Molter decides to help speed things up. He pulls out his staff and begins chanting the new spell he recently learned, Land of Ruins. Then a dense, ominous fog spreads out around the approaching giant. Inside this zone, any allies receive powerful buffs, while enemies grow significantly weaker. With the field tilted in Atu's favor, the fight should be over before anyone even blinks. Atu gladly takes advantage of the support spell and wastes no time drawing her blade, unleashing one of the sacred sword techniques she acquired to slice the giant cleanly in half. It's all going according to routine, and Atu prepares to turn back toward the city until something odd catches her eye. Instead of a corpse, the remains of the giant vanish into thin air, and in their place, a pile of gold coins materializes on the battlefield. She immediately contacts Takuto to report the anomaly, but he's just as puzzled as she is. This sort of thing never happened during any of his sessions with Minara when it was still a game. She then checks with Molter to see if this was some hidden mechanic or local phenomenon, but he's equally baffled. Not only have they never seen coins appear like this before, but the patterns engraved on them are completely unfamiliar, making it impossible to trace their origin. That's when Takuto gets an idea, and he asks Atu to link her vision with his so he can get a direct look at the coins. Once her sight is shared, Takuto studies the markings carefully, scanning his memory for anything even remotely similar. After a bit of thinking, he recalls an RPG played in the past called Brave Questus, and he's certain that game used coins bearing this exact crest. At the same time, far to the north, in a ruined city left in the wake of Arakimo's destruction, the saint and her holy knights are making their way through the devastated streets. But just as the knights begin to assess the situation, their heads explode simultaneously. And the cause, of course, is none other than Arakino herself. This is now the 17th encounter between her and the saint, who still can't understand how this lunatic keeps coming back to life. Arakino responds mockingly, stating that she has indeed died 17 times so far at the saint's hands. But if they're talking about records, Arakino thinks it's a little unfair how insanely strong the saint is. Arakino's no weakling, but she's never gotten close to winning, and her deaths are always painfully brutal. The saint cuts her off, accusing her of stalling for time, which Arakino admits is true. With her trick exposed, she immediately begins manipulating the corpses around them, including the recently slain knights, raising them all at once and sending them to attack. The saint is visibly disgusted by the display, but still, her resolve is unwavering. So she grips her staff and calls forth a searing inferno that wipes out the reanimated bodies in one burst. With nothing left standing, she rushes Arakino and drives her weapon straight into her chest, killing her again, and this time for the 18th time. Even as Arakino's body crumbles, the saint knows this won't be the last encounter because her adversary always finds a way to return. But for now, this victory gives her the time she needs to finally craft a plan that might end it once and for all. At the same time, back in Dragonton, an enormous force of giants has suddenly emerged near the outskirts of the city, and the guards stationed on the walls are in full panic. None of them have ever witnessed such a massive horde of giants gathered in one location before. At this point, Takuto has come to a realization that the army attacking Dragonton must have originated from the world of Brave Questus, a game where players assume the role of a hero destined to defeat the Demon Lord. The lack of any warning signs before the giants show up now makes sense, considering that enemy encounters in that game were completely random. Isla had always considered the possibility that they'd eventually face opponents who were summoned into this world just like they were, but she never once imagined that those enemies would come from a completely different game genre. The structure and mechanics of Eternal Nations are drastically different from those of Brave Questus, but Takuto has first-hand experience with both titles, so he already knows exactly what needs to be done. On a ridge overlooking the city, the two masterminds behind the siege, Flamin and Ice Rock, are busy discussing their next move. It turns out they've been given total freedom to use any means necessary to conquer territory in the name of the Demon Lord. Since their arrival in this world, they've been incredibly lucky because all the goblins and giants nearby joined their demon army without resistance, giving them a sizable force to use in their campaign to dominate the land. Still, as Ice Rock reflects on things, he remembers that their entire lives used to revolve around conquering the game world of Brave Questus before being dragged into this new reality. Now that they're here, is it really worth abandoning everything they built in the old world to take over this one? The thought lingers for a moment, but Flamin couldn't care less because deep thinking isn't his thing. He tells Ice Rock that the only thing that matters now is obeying the Demon Lord's will. And with that, the two prepare to bring destruction to Dragonton and flood the land with despair. At Ice Rock's command, the horde of monsters surges forward toward the city, and then he asks Flamin if he plans to join the battle. But Flamin waves him off, saying he'll sit this one out and leave the glory to Ice Rock. Grateful, Ice Rock leaps down onto the field, eager to lead the assault, while Flamin stays behind to begin executing his side objective for this mission. Down below, Ice Rock rallies his troops and instructs them to raise the city. But before the siege can fully begin, a dense, dark smoke spreads across the battlefield. And the moment it settles, the monsters begin coughing and wheezing, choking on the toxic air. Ice Rock and his mage assistant are taken aback because they've never seen a magical effect like this before. But judging by how the neutral creatures are suffering while those of evil alignment, like Ice Rock and the mage, are becoming stronger, the assistant quickly deduces that the spell must be tailored specifically to empower dark-aligned combatants. Then at that moment, one of Atu's tentacles pierces clean through the assistant mage's torso, ending him on the spot. With him out of the way, her focus shifts to Ice Rock. Takuto makes a brief remark about a warrior tied to ice, which leads Atu to assume that Ice Rock must be one of the 4 top generals serving under the Demon Lord. Ice Rock, now visibly agitated, demands to know how she uncovered his identity so quickly, and Atu casually explains that she's a hero unit from the game Eternal Nations, acting under the divine will of her magnificent ruler, King Takuto. And honestly, there's no point in dragging the conversation out because she intends to eliminate every last one of them anyway. Back near the city's defenses, Antic rallies the troops and instructs them to release a volley of arrows at the incoming horde. But the result is so underwhelming that she immediately scraps that idea and commands everyone to begin evacuating the city. Right then, Molter arrives and can't help but chuckle at Antic for already thinking of retreat, but she argues it's the only choice left. For now, his enchantment has slowed the enemy's advance, but it's only a matter of time before it wears off. And once the army reaches their gates, there's no way in hell they're holding it back. Molter understands her fear, but he tells her she has nothing to worry about. Atu is already out there, tearing through the enemy, and as long as she's on the field, they can't lose. And soon enough, she'll remove the enemy's commander from the equation, and without their general, the monster troops will collapse into chaos. Then from there, Dragonton's soldiers should be able to clean up the rest without much issue. Antic is shocked by how composed Molter is in the middle of a situation this dire. But when she looks toward the front lines and sees Atu shredding through the enemy like a force of nature, it all makes sense and everything Molter said was true. And now she's left wondering just how terrifyingly powerful the nation of Minara really is. Meanwhile, Ice Rock is being completely humiliated. Atu weaves through his strikes with ease, eliminating enemy units left and right as if this were a game to her. Ice Rock is at a loss because he hasn't even landed a single hit, and yet she's dominating the entire fight. But what he doesn't realize is that she's following the battle strategy Takuto devised. See, Brave Questus operates on a roleplay-focused combat system built for small skirmishes, while Eternal Nations is a civilization-level strategy sim. That means warriors like Atu can engage across vastly larger zones than anyone coming from Brave Questus could ever imagine. Ice Rock shouts at Atu, demanding to know why she's even bothering to get in his way. He points out that she's clearly from the evil faction, so she should naturally be on his side, helping the Demon Lord take over the world. Honestly, there was a time when Atu and Takuto considered going the world domination route, but they dropped it pretty fast because it sounded like way too much effort. Atu's already drowning in paperwork just running one kingdom, so why the hell would she want to manage the entire world on top of that? The mention of paperwork completely loses Ice Rock, who didn't even know such a thing existed. So Atu asks him how he planned to run the world after conquering it. She chuckles and says he probably came straight out of one of those RPGs where nobody bothered writing a backstory for the mid-boss. Ice Rock has no clue what RPG even means, so Atu tries to jog his memory by reminding him how many times he's probably been obliterated by some random hero over and over again in a game. She tells him he's nothing more than a filler mid-boss meant to lose, and as much as she'd love to say she relates, she can't really sympathize with a walking loser like him. All the while, she's deflecting his strikes like it's nothing. Ice Rock starts to lose it and screams that he'll crush anyone who stands against his great demon king, but Atu just laughs and says the only real ruler here is Takudo, the supreme leader of Manara. Then she notices that Ice Rock is charging up an attack, and she thinks to herself how silly he must be if he expects to land such a predictable blow. But as she tries to step back, she suddenly realizes her feet won't move because he's frozen them solid with frost. She didn't see that coming, and now she's wide open as Ice Rock's axe comes swinging down. The hit actually lands, and it seriously messes her up. Ice Rock feels like a champion for finally doing real damage. But just a few seconds later, Atu rises back to her feet and immediately kills him without breaking a sweat. She feels annoyed that she let such a weakling get a hit in, but her body regenerates so fast that the wound's gone before it even matters. Still, she starts ranting about how ridiculous that ability was and how exactly is anyone supposed to avoid a move that literally locks you in place right before the hit lands. But when she checks the skill description after stealing it, she finds out it literally guarantees a hit, so there was nothing she could have done to avoid it. Now that he's dealt with, she tries contacting Takudo to send her status report. But the moment she reaches out, a cold chill runs down her spine as she learned that multiple hostile forces have surrounded Manara. Elsewhere on the continent, the demon lord from Brave Questus is hard at work building his fortress, surveying the lands of this unfamiliar world he's determined to dominate. Meanwhile, back in Manara, a breathless dark elf soldier bursts into Takudo's study with urgent news. An enemy force is headed toward them, but Takudo already anticipated this and shows no signs of panic. Isla calmly informs the soldier that one of Takudo's abilities grants him awareness of everything happening within the borders of his domain. So the moment the hostile army entered their territory, Takudo had already dispatched Nagi and the primary military force to intercept. Worried about the situation, Maria and Karia ask if the kingdom is truly at risk, but Takudo assures them there's no cause for alarm because everything is going according to plan. Isla then raises a valid concern that the demon lord leading this assault might be a fellow player like Takudo, but Takudo is way past the point of caring. Under different circumstances, he might try diplomacy, but since Atu already eliminated one of the demon lord's elite generals, and they've made the foolish move of invading his territory directly, Takudo's response will be anything but merciful. Right now, the kingdom's forces include Isla, Nagi, the elite dark elf soldiers, medics gifted with healing magic, and the larval constructs Isla developed for construction work, all of whom are ready to join the fray, so with such a unit, defending Manara shouldn't be too difficult. Shortly after, Takudo receives word from Emil that she successfully evacuated all non-combatant residents, and he's relieved to hear it because fewer civilians around means fewer casualties. Soon after, Nagi reaches out from the battlefield with an update on the approaching enemy force. From what he's seen, they're looking at around 1,000 strong, including goblins, orcs, and a few odd hybrid creatures that he can't even identify. Takudo thanks him for the status report and tells him to stay sharp and focus on keeping the capital safe. It's a significantly larger force than he originally expected, and chances are one of the demon lord's remaining top generals is among them, so it's shaping up to be a serious confrontation. Thankfully, Manara's current supply reserve is healthy, and considering Takudo's in-depth knowledge of Brave Questus mechanics, they have the upper hand. Isla assumes he intends to use their resources to summon new combat units, but to her surprise, Takudo informs her that he's pouring all of it into her. He tells her to reach the next tier as soon as possible and unlock both the predation and parasitive egg abilities. And once she has those under her belt, she'll be more than capable of tearing through the enemy ranks without breaking a sweat. Takudo explains he's already got a solid red on the power level of the 4 generals thanks to watching Atu's battle with the Ice General. Based on that, he believes Isla, now significantly powered up, should be able to handle one of them without much difficulty. Hearing that boosts Isla's morale, and she humbly thanks Takudo for placing that much trust in her. And with renewed determination, she promises to meet his expectations and heads out to join the battlefield. But before she takes off, Takudo gives her one last word of caution. He reminds her that the RP system is full of cheap, unfair mechanics, and a single unexpected trick could be lethal. Isla remembers the incident where something similar happened to Atu, so she assures him that she'll proceed with caution and won't let her guard down. That covers everything Takudo needed to go over, so Isla says her farewells to the twins and civilians and lifts into the sky with purpose. At the same time, in a deeper section of the woods, a squad of flame-wielding demon soldiers advances toward Manara. The knight mutters about how strange it is that Flamen ordered them to split off from Ice Rock's forces to head into this eerie-looking forest. The mage accompanying him offers a theory that Flamen might have launched this mission without the demon lord's knowledge, and might actually be planning a betrayal in the near future. That stuns the knight, who asks what would drive Flamen to turn against his own leader. The mage explains that while most of them were abruptly summoned to this new world, Flamen and the demon lord had a completely different experience. He's just about to elaborate when something moving through the trees catches their attention. They stop marching and turn to see what it is, and soon a lone orc scout stumbles out from the underbrush, and at first they assume it's just one of their own units returning with intel. But as the creature steps into view, it becomes clear that something is deeply wrong. The mage warns it to stay back, and as the orc steps closer, it finally sees it clearly. Its entire body is covered in throbbing, tumor-like bulges. The orc begs them for help, not understanding what's happening to him. But by then, it's already too late. In a gruesome moment, countless of Isla's larvae burst out from every inch of the scout's skin, swarming toward the fire soldiers like a living storm. The squad breaks into panic, slashing at the swarm in desperation, but there are far too many to handle. So the mage shouts for everyone to fall back and regroup outside the forest, hoping to escape the ambush. But just as they start to retreat, a mocking voice calls out from the trees, ridiculing them for trying to run away so quickly. That shit only pushes the troops into full-blown panic, and both the knight and the mage shout at the unseen attacker to reveal themselves. But what they definitely didn't expect was a freaking 10-foot-tall mantis stepping out of the shadows. As Isla emerges from the tree line, she taunts them, saying that if they truly wanted to call themselves creatures of darkness, they should have fought with more cruelty and precision, something she's about to demonstrate firsthand. Needless to say, they never stood a chance because within moments, the entire squad lay slaughtered, and Isla is left wondering if it's even worth consuming their remains since they don't look like they provide much nourishment. But right then, her senses pick up something strong heading her way. She turns toward it and asks whether the newcomer intends to avenge the soldiers she just butchered. But Flamen admits that he doesn't give a damn about them, and he introduces himself as one of the Demon Lord's 4 generals. Isla perks up at that, genuinely pleased that one of the big shots came to her instead of making her track him down, which saves her some legwork. Flamen is startled that Isla knew he'd be here, but she calmly explains it was only logical. An army that large needed a commanding figure behind it, and once the commander falls, the rest are bound to scatter, just like what happened to Ice Rock back in Dragonton. That bit catches Flamen off guard because he didn't know Ice Rock had already been taken out so soon. Then again, he mutters that the fool never was very bright, so his downfall was only a matter of time. Isla interrupts and scolds him for trash-talking a comrade, but Flamen just smirks and says he never cared for Ice Rock anyway. He adds that Ice Rock was the weakest of the generals, while he himself is leagues beyond him in strength, so Isla had better not assume she'll take him down so easily. Isla just smirks at his confidence because she finds it kind of cute that he's already decided how this will end. But Flamen isn't bluffing, he truly believes he's far above her, and once he's finished turning her to ash, he says he'll personally march into Minara, tear her pathetic king off his throne, and put an end to him too. Up until that moment, Isla had been treating the conversation with casual mockery, but the instant Flamen insulted Takuto, the playful attitude vanished and was replaced with cold fury. Flamen notices this shift but scoffs, thinking it won't change a thing. He ignites his aura, leaps high into the air, and hurtles toward Isla, sparking the first clash of their battle. At the same time in the city, the twins keep watch outside Takuto's chamber while he focuses his abilities to monitor the battlefield. From what he can sense, Isla has just begun clashing with Flamen, but he's not the least bit concerned. They've already proven that Minara's heroes hit far harder than anything spawned by the RPE system. So as far as Takuto's concerned, it's only a matter of time before Isla wins her fight, just as it 2 once did. Meanwhile, to the south, Nagi and the Dark Elf warriors have established a defensive perimeter around the capital, holding back any of Flamen's troops attempting to advance, and Emil is busy handling the evacuation of civilians. So on the surface, everything seems to be running smoothly, yet Takuto feels an uncomfortable weight in his chest, as though disaster is creeping closer. The twins pick up on his unease and ask what's wrong, but Takuto can't put his finger on it. He even asks if they can think of any overlooked variables, but they're just as stumped as he is. Back on the front lines, Isla and Flamen have been trading blows for several minutes. Flamen admits he's impressed because he didn't expect the monsters of this world to possess such strength. Hearing him sneer and call her a freak infuriates Isla, so she unleashes a horde of her larvae, swarming him from every angle. Under normal circumstances, that would have been the end of him, but Flamen incinerates them with his flames, reducing them to ash and tearing free. With a grin, he mocks her, saying it isn't fair that she's the only one summoning minions. He spreads his arms, and in seconds, squads of orcs and goblins are conjured around him. Isla is caught off guard because she hadn't realized Flamen could summon as well. Worse yet, his technique doesn't seem to drain resources, meaning he can do it as often as he pleases. Isla narrows her eyes, intrigued, and suddenly calls for a pause, saying she has a question. But Flamen has no interest in entertaining her curiosity, and instead of answering, he hurls volleys of fireballs, forcing Isla to shield herself with fresh swarms of larvae. He then orders his summoned troops to rush her, but Isla infects them with her parasites, twisting them under her control and forcing Flamen to retreat a step. Using that brief respite, she finally asks why he chose to attack Minara at all, because splitting off from the Dragontan invasion sounded like a pretty dumb idea even by villain standards. Flamen responds by telling her that if her so-called king hasn't filled her in yet, then maybe she ought to rethink where her loyalties lie. Isla, however, has no idea what he's referring to, and even if she did, nothing could ever shake her devotion to Takuto. Flamen had expected that kind of answer, but actually hearing it out loud irritates him more than he expected, so he snarls and demands to know what she thinks her purpose is. With steady conviction, Isla replies that she is a champion of Manabra and a sworn servant of King Takuto. That response only makes Flamen angrier because he can't wrap his head around how she can speak the word servant with such pride. And then it clicks. Isla chose her loyalty willingly and serves Takuto because she wants to, and that freedom makes her stronger. He, on the other hand, is bound by the Demon Lord's command whether he likes it or not because that's how his world was coded and he despises it. But he clings to one belief. If he carries out his mission and wipes out everyone here, he'll finally be released from his chains. As he declares this, he unleashes the full extent of his power. For the first time, Isla realizes that Flamen's entire struggle stems from a desire for freedom, and though she feels a flicker of pity, it doesn't change a thing. Flamen then hurls a roaring tide of fire across the skies, chasing her relentlessly. One blast strikes her dead on, and he's convinced it's over. But to his frustration, Isla emerges unharmed, having shielded herself in a hardened cocoon. She calmly tells him that if he really wants to bring her down, he'll have to do far better than that. In the next instant, Flamen unleashes a rapid barrage of fire, but Isla dodges with ease until his mana burns out completely, leaving him wide open. Seizing the chance, she slashes him deep across the chest. As the wound takes its toll, Flamen realizes this is the end. His thoughts drift back to that strange being who spoke to him and the Demon Lord before they were summoned here. It had promised him freedom if he destroyed this entire world. But now, bleeding and broken, he accepts that a puppet like him was never capable of fulfilling such an impossible task. Still, surrender isn't in his nature. Moments later, Isla's blade cleaves him in two, and Flamen is finally defeated. She immediately tries to contact Takuto to report her victory, but the link suddenly cuts off. Maria and Karia then appear before her out of nowhere, leaving Isla completely confused. She orders her larvae to form a defensive line around the twins, but at that very moment, the dead Flamen begins to smile. Takuto watches the chaos unfold from his end and immediately tries to ping the others, but an error pops up telling him the chat system isn't available. That had literally never happened before, and his nerves kicked into overdrive. Isla wasn't doing any better because she had already tried reaching out to everyone she could think of, but no one was replying. Not wanting to leave anything to chance, she grabbed Maria and Karia and took off, flying hard to get them somewhere safe. But after several minutes of flying, something felt wrong, and sure enough, they ended up back in the exact same location they started from. Suddenly, Flamen broke into hysterical laughter, clearly enjoying the absurdity of the moment. He casually said there's no skipping this scene, and everyone has to play their part. Isla freezes in disbelief because he's speaking and she was certain he had already died. She then didn't waste time and tried to finish him off again with a clean strike, but he didn't even blink at the damage. He just smirked and told her nothing she did now could stop what's coming. He was already dead anyway, so there was no point trying to kill him again. Isla swung again, faster and harder, but this time, her attack froze mid-air, stuck in place like something had overridden her command. At that same moment, Takuto's display lit up with a notification. Important characters are protected during story events, and just like that, it clicked. He remembered the storyline from Brave Quests that after Flamen's first death, he briefly resurrects just long enough to hit the entire squad with an unblockable move. Meanwhile, Isla and the girls had no clue what was about to drop on them. Still, Isla kept her voice calm and told the twins everything would be alright. Flamen chuckled darkly and said it was sweet how much she cared about them, but sadly she wouldn't be able to back up that promise. Furious, Isla lashed out, slamming attack after attack into him in a desperate effort to stop whatever was coming, but none of it worked. Flamen calmly reminded her that he was already dead by the system's rules, so she wouldn't be able to kill him now even if he weren't being guarded by the story. Then out of nowhere, Isla's whole body locked up, frozen stiff like her limbs had been hijacked. She knew something external was stopping her from continuing the assault, and her face twisted in frustration. Flamen notices her fury and sighs, saying there's no point being mad at him because he wasn't the one pulling the strings. And just like them, he was stuck in this goddamn scripted event and he's been through it countless times before and he despises it even more than they do. Suddenly, both Maria and Karia start strolling straight toward Flamen without understanding why. Their faces are full of panic, but their bodies aren't responding and they're being moved like puppets. Isla sees what's happening and rushes to stop them, but the scenario clamps down hard, freezing her in place the second she tries to interfere. Flamen just laughs as she struggles, clearly enjoying every second. He tells her she finally gets it, that unbearable, sick feeling of watching something unfold while being completely powerless to stop it. And that's what he's been stuck in for decades. No matter how much she screams or resists, none of it matters. The script won't bend and she's about to watch two people she cares about die right in front of her. Maria and Karia are trembling as they get closer to him, crying out to Isla in sheer terror, begging her to help. Isla fights with everything she has to move, pushing her body past its limits, and the strain is so brutal that her skin splits open and her arms start bleeding, but it's useless, and she's locked in place. Flamen watches her desperation with cold eyes and tells her to stop wasting her breath because he knows exactly what it's like. And once an event starts, there's no escaping it because it's all already written. He calls her a fool for thinking she had any kind of freedom. None of them do. Not her. Not him. Not even the damn Demon Lord. They're all just trapped ticking pieces in someone else's game. He says he once believed he could break free, that someone had offered him control over his own fate. But now he knows it was all a lie, and there's no such thing as freedom for characters like them because they were born to serve a script and nothing more. He curses the one who made him believe otherwise, and then he spits out Takuto's name like venom. In Flamin's eyes, Takuto is no different, just another player pushing pieces across a board, using people like tools until they break. So if he's going down anyway, he'll make sure to drag one of Takuto's precious favorites with him. Isla begs him not to go through with it, her voice cracking with everything she has left, but Flamin only says that there's no stopping a cutscene once it starts. And then, with no warning, his body erupts in a violent blast with Maria and Carria right next to him when it hits. When the smoke clears, the girls open their eyes inside a massive crater, and Isla is standing above them, barely holding herself up. 50% of her body is wrecked, burned, and broken, but she's alive. And we learn that at the last second, she threw herself between the explosion and the twins, taking the hit meant for them. She smiles faintly, relieved they're okay, even if she's barely breathing. Maria and Carria can't hold back their tears. They rush to Isla's side, begging her to let them carry her back to town for treatment. But when they try to contact Takuto for help, there's no answer. The girls start to spiral, unsure what to do or how to even react. Panic sets in, but Isla tells them not to waste their breath trying to call anyone. It's pointless because no medic out there could fix injuries this bad. She knows she doesn't have much time left, so she tells Maria and Carria to listen closely. She's not going to make it out of this, but before she goes, there's one final thing she needs them to do. The twins break down, blaming themselves for getting caught in Flamin's blast. They cry that this must be karma for thinking they could finally have a happy life, but Isla shuts that down fast. She tells them none of this is their fault. If anything, it's hers for being too weak to survive the hit. But Maria and Carria can't accept that. This is the second time someone who felt like a mother to them has died trying to protect them. They're done pretending they're strong enough to keep going, so they beg Isla to let them die with her because there is no point in living if everyone they love ends up dead anyway. Isla tells them to stop and listen closely because there's something she needs to pass on. She knows this is going to sound twisted, especially after what the girls went through, being forced to survive by eating their mother's remains, but this has to be done. She pushes her hand into her own chest without hesitation, rips out her heart, and holds it out to them. She tells them to eat it and live on for her. The twins collapse into tears, horrified, shaking their heads that they can't do it. Not again. They don't want to go through that nightmare twice. But Isla explains that she has a unique skill called royal succession, and if they consume her heart, her powers, her techniques, her entire skill set, all of it will become theirs. She's sorry she couldn't keep her promise to stay by their side, but this is the only thing she can still give them, so she begs them to take her heart and live on for her sake. At the same time in Dragonten, Atuve is nearly finished wiping out the remaining pockets of the demon army. She's doing great work, but she's also getting seriously annoyed. Molter's been trailing behind her non-stop, clinging to her like a lost puppy. She tells him he can go wait in the city like a normal person, but he refuses, reminding her that Takuto gave him direct orders and he's to march with her until the Demon Lord's fortress is turned to dust. And of course, that's when more monsters show up again. Atu rolls her eyes, clearly fed up, and she's not in the mood for this shit, so without wasting a second, she skewers every damn one of them straight through the throat. But then, out of nowhere, Atu's interface pings with a system alert, and as she reads it, her eyes widen in disbelief. A second later, her fury erupts into a raw scream that shakes the entire battlefield. Molter immediately recognizes the danger and yells for everyone nearby to hit the ground unless they got a death wish. The storm inside her only lasts a moment before Atu manages to pull herself back, exhaling hard as she apologizes for losing it like that. Molter says it's no big deal, but he asks what the hell just happened to trigger her so badly, so she tells him that Isla is dead. At the same time in Mainabra, Takuto is still frozen in shock, unable to process it. He knew about Flamin's infamous scripted sequence because it was a staple in the Brave Quest storyline, but he never thought it would carry over into this world. He then tries to connect with Isla one more time, but this time he gets a message that confirms her existence has been erased from the system. The words drop like a hammer and he collapses his knees, crushed by the realization that he's just lost one of his most trusted heroes for real. In the original quest, one version of the event always ended with a single character sacrificing themselves and transferring their power to two others, and that's exactly what happened here. Cutting back to the twins, Maria and Carria have just finished consuming Isla's heart as she had asked them to. The power of royal succession activates, and with it, they inherit Isla's title and power as Mainara's next generation of heroes. But this moment doesn't bring them pride or happiness, only a heavy silence as they quietly join hands and begin walking toward the Demon Lord's fortress. Now that the scripted event has ended, communication channels are back online. Takuto immediately contacts Atu and brings her up to speed. He tells her Isla was taken out by a cutscene event, one that couldn't be interrupted. Atu doesn't fully understand what that means, but she figures it's similar to Ice Rock's unavoidable finishing move. Isla's death hints like a strategic disaster, so Atu says she wants to drop everything and return to Mainabra immediately, but Takuto stops her. He explains that while Isla's gone, the twins made it through, and because of Isla's royal succession ability, they've inherited her legacy. The problem is they're already marching toward the stronghold, fueled by rage, grief, and a thirst for vengeance. And they're so locked in that even Takuto's commands aren't reaching them. He makes it clear that Mainara can't risk losing more heroes, so he needs Atu to chase after them and bring them back before they get themselves killed. Atu understands the logic, but she doesn't agree. She argues that leaving Takuto behind without a hero to guard him is dangerous, especially now when there are still unknown mechanics and potential exploits in play that could be used against him. So the last thing they need is a surprise event while he's unprotected. Takuto appreciates Atu's caution and the fact that she's thinking of his safety first, but right now she's the only one he trusts to deal with the twins. Getting Maria and Karia back in one piece is the top priority, and there's no time to argue. He tells her flat out that this is a direct order and it's not up for debate. Atu clenches her jaw, nods once, and takes off at full speed to intercept them. She still hates the idea of leaving Takuto exposed, but she reminds herself that he's not some clueless player. He's a master tactician, and if he made this call, then he must be confident he knows what he's doing. Elsewhere, near the front lines of the demon army's defense zone, Karia is calmly walking up to the Wind Demon General alone. The general narrows her eyes, both confused and amused by the sight of a lone child strolling into enemy territory without a care in the world. She's just about to give the command to vaporize the girl when Karia lifts her gaze and unlocks her new power. And as for Maria, she's always been a little off, but losing Isla shattered something inside her. Now she's practically dancing in front of the Earth's general forces, laughing about how the world despises her. Her expression is twisted with misery, and the general can't decide whether she's freaking mad or terrifying. Back on Karia's side, every demon in the area suddenly starts screeching in agony, their bodies writhing like they're being torn apart from the inside. The Wind General realizes it must be Karia's doing and tries to end her with a cursed gust, but the girl doesn't flinch because her new ability, Divine Light, cancels all curse-based magic completely. Then she locks eyes with the general, and in seconds, the skin on the demon's body begins to rot and slow off her bones. It's another of Karia's new powers that infects her targets with a flesh-consuming disease, and within seconds, the Wind Demon's face liquefies and she collapses dead before she even has time to scream. Back over at Maria's side of the battlefield, her power, shaped by her constant dissociation, manifests as a curse that erases knowledge. Specifically, she makes the Earth General's massive mech forget how to function. Its limbs seize up, and the whole machine collapses into a heap. And no matter what the General does, he can't override the effect. That's when Maria activates her second power, one born from the trauma of having to consume the remains of two mother figures. It gives her a psychic bite that is capable of tearing through multiple targets at once, and when she snaps her jaws shut, chunks of the mech and its golems are ripped clean off and vanish into nothingness. That just leaves the Earthquake General, who's visibly trembling. Maria notices his fear and calmly erases it from his memory, putting him into a passive trance. Then, just like the others, she takes a bite out of him, and it's over. Once the carnage settles, the twins turn their backs to the battlefield and walk away without a word. Their footsteps echo sharply in the silence that follows, leaving nothing but destruction behind them. Then a system alert pops up saying that Maria and Karia are now officially registered as a new world threat, and they're given a new title called the Witches of Regret, one that will spread far and wide. This was the final episode. Subscribe for more anime recaps. Not long after, the Demon King locks his intense eyes on Maria and Karia. As they slowly move toward him, he can't wrap his head around how two soft-faced kids like them manage to reach power on par with his own. Deep down, it feels like destiny itself is playing some cruel joke on him, and that's exactly why he's made up his mind to wipe it all out. He'll erase everything, burn this world to the ground, and offer it up as his sacrifice because that was the deal he struck with the deity. In return, he's convinced he'll finally be set free, but before the showdown kicks off, he wants to know if they believe some divine being actually exists. The girls shoot back a chilling stare, their crimson eyes glowing like fire, and without even blinking, they call it bullshit, saying deities are nothing but a lie. Instantly, the Demon Lord throws up a heavy-duty barrier around himself, not taking any chances. But what happens next slaps the arrogance right off his face, because the twins shatter it with just a freaking look. He's absolutely floored because that shield was supposed to be unbreakable, and only the chosen hero should be able to wreck it. But according to the terms of his divine deal, that hero wasn't even supposed to be born in this world. So how the hell are there two girls standing in front of him who just tore through it? But the twins don't say a word because they don't care to explain. They just keep walking forward, calm as hell, ready to end this. The Demon Lord snarls and shifts into a grotesque nightmare, his form mutating into a freakish beast covered in twisted, jagged swords shooting out of his back. Now drunk on his own monstrous power, he's sure they've got no shot. And with a smug grin, he hurls a barrage of blades at them, but Maria doesn't even blink. With a damn seductive smirk on her lips, she stops every single blade midair, like it's child's play. Karia follows up, calling forth a brutal spell that slams the monster deep into the dirt. While he's stuck, the sisters grab the sword lying nearby and charge. The Demon Lord tries to retaliate, but Karia meets him head-on, and with one savage swing slices clean through his arm. The force of it rips away half his monstrous body, turning it to dust. But even mangled and broken, the bastard won't give up. That twisted promise he made, the one where peace and freedom are waiting on the other side of destruction, that's the only thing keeping him from falling apart. The twins, on the other hand, just laugh at his pathetic desperation. They mock him without a shred of sympathy, saying outright that this so-called deity is nothing but a damn myth. Karia takes it a step further, warning that putting your faith in someone swooping in to save you only sets you up for a world of disappointment. That's exactly what they once believed about Isla, and in the end, it did nothing but rip their hearts apart. But then out of nowhere, the Demon Lord's wounds vanish. He's suddenly restored, every injury erased in a blink, healed by the divine power of the deity he serves. Bursting with joy, he lifts his head, ready to shout the deity's name in gratitude. But before a single word escapes his mouth, his body is ripped clean in half, cut down by someone neither of them expected. The twins spin around, locking eyes on the stranger who just butted into their fight. They demand to know who the hell he is and what gave him the idea to step into something that had nothing to do with him. He shrugs casually, saying he thought they looked like they needed a hand, so he jumped in. Carrie's tone turns sharp, dead serious, as she warns that his so-called help wasn't needed, nor asked for. He lifts both hands as if to calm them down, saying he's not here to start trouble. Then with a smug little grin, he throws in a jab, telling them they're honestly cuter when they're not pissed. Still, he adds that even if they tried, they wouldn't last 2 seconds against him. They're just not strong enough yet to beat someone like him. The sisters glare daggers at him. They don't give a damn about his power or his cocky attitude. This bastard just stole their one shot at making things right for Isla, and that's something they won't forgive. Fueled by rage, they launch themselves into the air, ready to cut him down. But before they even get close, Atu shows up out of thin air. Her magic freezes their feet in place, stopping them mid-attack. She calmly informs them that Takudo has issued a direct order to return immediately, because his mission's done and their job is over. But the girls are refusing flat out because to them, the fight isn't finished. They still have a score to settle with the man who screwed everything up. Atu, though, doesn't budge, and she reminds them that Takudo's orders aren't up for debate, and disobeying him would be an act of betrayal. But the twins push back hard, saying Takudo once told them they were free to act however they wanted, because they were born evil anyway. But as they reflect more on his words, they remember something else. He also told them to do whatever would make their mother proud. And just like that, the truth hits them. Going up against Atu, turning against Minara, isn't what Isla wanted them to do. With hearts weighed down by guilt, the twins slowly lower their blades. They look Atu in the eye and give a genuine apology for the way they acted. Atu accepts it with a calm nod, saying she'll let it slide just this once. The guy who interrupted earlier throws in his own quick apology for sticking his nose where it didn't belong and vanishes without another word. As Atu watches him disappear, something about him catches her attention. He was wearing a school uniform. So if he really is the one Takudo suspects he is, then maybe it's smarter not to get involved, not yet. Once things settle, the girls quietly ask Atu if there's even the slightest hope that Isla could be brought back to life. But Atu gently tells them the truth. Resurrection isn't possible. That answer crushes them, and both girls break down, crying uncontrollably over the person they lost. While they grieve, Atu drafts a report for Takudo, letting him know they're heading back, and he replies with a blessing, wishing them a safe return home. Back at base, Takudo starts piecing things together, and it's not good. He's slowly realizing that this world runs on more than just cheap powers. It's following the full mechanics of a 4X strategy game. Up until now, he thought it was all about cheat skills and nothing else, but now it's clear the enemies are playing with their own set of RPG rules. And that's not even the worst part. There are so many damn game genres out there, which means endless new threats could show up at any time. Meanwhile, the mystery man who sliced the Demon Lord in half is stumbling through a narrow valley. Worn out and barely holding it together, he drops to his knees, body shaking as he replays what just happened. Facing Atu and the twins scare the hell out of him. He clenches his fists and curses the deity that threw him into this twisted world. He remembers the lie he was fed, that 2 beautiful girls were in danger and needed saving. That was supposed to be it, just a simple rescue mission. But what he walked into was nothing short of a damn nightmare. Those girls weren't damsels. They were monsters wearing pretty faces. While he's still fuming, a girl walks up to him. His slave steps beside him and greets him sweetly, calling him her master. She tells him that the deity has already apologized for dragging him into this world by mistake. He grits his teeth again, not buying it for a second. To him, this wasn't some random screw-up. It was a setup from the start. If it weren't for that deity and that fateful run-in with the infamous Truck Kun, he wouldn't be here in the first place. Still, for all the bullshit, he admits there's at least one upside. Now he's got a loyal, adorable slave who's all his. While they're talking, a massive ogre suddenly lumbers up behind him. But the man doesn't even blink. In a single flash, he slices the beast into pieces, wiping it out instantly without breaking a sweat. That kind of absurd power, it's all thanks to the cheat skills dumped on him by the very deity he can't stand. And for that, annoying as it is, he has to admit he's a little thankful. His slave just stares in shock, completely floored by how ridiculously strong he really is. Feeling more sure of himself than ever, the man and the girl continue on their way, making a promise that they're going to give saving this damn world a shot. Back in the wreckage of the town, Arakino is brought back to life for the 19th damn time. The priest facing her just stares, utterly stunned. She burned Arakino to ash, literally turned her body into nothing, and sealed the remains with holy magic. Yet here she is again, like death never even touched her. Even though she's rattled, the priest hardens her heart. It's her sacred duty to wipe Arakino from existence, no matter how many damn times she has to do it. Somewhere else, a single die clinks into a bowl, and in that very moment, the priest is wiped out in one devastating hit. Even Arakino looks surprised for a second, but she doesn't dwell on it. Instead, she sneers down at the fallen priest, mocking her with a smirk. She groans that fighting the same woman over and over has been a damn drag. Then, as if bored, she lifts her eyes to the sky and offers praise to a divine being she calls the Dice Master. Back in Managra, Takuto's mind is spiraling, and the pressure is brutal. He finally understands that they're up against enemies who don't just use cheat skills. They've got entire game systems behind them, strategy mechanics, RPG setups, who the hell knows what else. And if they screw up again like they did before, it won't be a setback, it'll be total destruction. In a burst of rage, he slams his fist into the floor. The impact is so fierce, the entire surface caves in and sends him crashing through it. When he climbs back up, breathing heavy, something hits him. That collapse wasn't because the floor was weak, it broke because he's stupidly strong. Curious, Takuto decides to test it out by throwing a punch at a tree, and the damn thing explodes on impact. For the first time, it hits him that all this time he's been an attack unit himself, and he never once realized it. But that knowledge doesn't bring pride, it brings pain. If he'd only figured it out sooner, if he'd stopped acting like a damn bystander, maybe Isla wouldn't have had to die. After some time, Atu and the rest return from their mission, and a high-priority meeting is immediately assembled. The spotlight is on the twins, and their blatant insubordination has become the main issue on the table. Everyone braces themselves, fully expecting Takuto to lay down some serious punishment. But to everyone's shock, Takuto does the complete opposite. With total composure, he announces that the twins will receive no punishment at all. Atu is furious and immediately protests, saying that if their nation starts letting things like this slide, they'll lose all authority to keep order, and sooner or later it'll all fall apart. But Takuto gently shuts her down, saying that if anyone should be sorry, it's him. And right there, in front of the entire council, he bows deeply. Atu and the Dark Elves freeze in disbelief. Never in their lives had they imagined their king of all people would bow down and say sorry. But then he goes even further and makes a vow, swearing that Isla will be brought back from the dead. Atu reacts instantly, trying to talk sense into him. She says plain and simple, reviving a hero like Isla is completely out of reach, especially with the nation's current power level. But Takuto isn't backing down an inch and says that he doesn't give a damn how impossible it sounds. What matters is that Isla returns, that the sacred dress is restored, and that those who were torn from each other finally get the reunion they deserve. He reminds them that this was the exact promise he made back when they pulled off their Ascension victory. And if this world really follows the Eternal Nations system, then he knows deep in his soul that they can win again. And if they win, that promise becomes reality. But Atu pushes back hard and warns him that what he's talking about isn't just difficult, it's reckless. Ascension doesn't just change things, it rewrites the entire damn world. So if he actually tries to pull this off, the entire planet will turn on them. But Takuto waves off a warning without hesitation and coldly states that he couldn't care less because he'll personally crush anyone who dares to oppose them. As the words leave his mouth, the dark energy begins to swirl around him, radiating suffocating pressure. He admits the road ahead will be hellish, but he believes they can conquer it, so long as everyone follows his lead to the letter. At night, while Takuto is busy drafting strategies for upcoming battles and shoring up their defenses, the Dark Elves gather quietly to hold a small memorial for Isla. The mood is grim and most are drowning in grief. But as dawn begins to break, the twins step forward. They speak with boldness, telling everyone not to mourn, reminding them that Takuto gave his word that Isla would return. Still, their voices barely lift the heavy weight hanging over the group. The others, still shaken from everything they've lost, have started to doubt themselves. Whispers creep through the crowd, soft fears wondering whether they can even keep up with Takuto's wild goals. Hidden among the thick brush nearby, Takuto watches the scene play out in silence. He sees the uncertainty written on their faces, but then the twins raise their voices again. With firm conviction, they call on everyone to stay strong, to believe in Takuto, and not to throw away the faith they've held this far. Their words hit harder than anyone expected, and the Dark Elves feel a jolt of spirit return because no one ever thought encouragement would come from children. In the shadows, Takuto feels a swell of pride in his chest. The twins' loyalty cuts straight to his heart. The following morning, Atu enters the throne room and is caught off guard by what she finds. Takuto, their unwavering king, is in the middle of an emotional collapse. The twins are right beside him, trying to comfort him as